Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Drew Shoden. Drew Shoden was born on September 26, 1981, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to parents Alan and Linda. Although her parents divorced when Drew was 3, they remained friends. At age 10, Drew and her older brother Sven began living with their mother and her mother's new husband, Sid Walker, in a cozy home near Minnesota's picturesque Whitefish Lake. In high school, Drew excelled in school, earning honors, playing golf, and being named prom queen in 1999. Her true passion, however, was art. Her room at home was filled with sketches of rock stars, models, and friends. Drew graduated from high school and attended the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, a city of about 50,000. Her friends knew her as a vibrant and compassionate person who loved helping others. Drew loved to travel and had long wanted to visit Australia, planning to make the trip in the spring of 2004. To save up for the trip, she worked 2 part-time jobs, one as a sales associate at Victoria's Secret and one as a waitress at a Grand Forks nightclub. On the evening of November 22, 2003, Drew finished her shift at the Victoria's Secret store in Columbia Mall at 4 p.m. Before heading to her second job at the nightclub, she decided to go shopping and purchase a purse from a store in the mall. While walking to her car in the parking lot, Drew called her boyfriend, Chris Lang. However, their conversation was cut short after Drew said, "Okay." Since they were not discussing anything important, Chris didn't think much of it and didn't call her back. About 3 hours later, Chris's phone rang. It was Drew, but instead of hearing her voice, Chris heard the sound of wind and the click of buttons on the phone. Drew lived in a college dorm with her friend Meg Murphy. At the same time Chris received the mysterious phone call, Meg received a call from the nightclub where Drew worked. The staff were trying to figure out why Drew had not shown up for her shift and had not answered her phone. As a responsible and punctual employee, her absence immediately worried her coworkers. However, Meg had no idea where Drew was and was surprised when Drew did not show up for work as scheduled. Meg contacted mutual friends and then called the local hospital. The hospital told her that Drew had not been admitted. Finding no information, Meg contacted the police around 9 p.m. A police officer was dispatched to the Columbia Mall, where Drew worked, to investigate. Although the mall was closed, the police drove through the parking lot and found Drew's car. The police found the car unlocked, with no signs of a struggle or any evidence of a crime. A black nylon sheath from a folding knife was found on the ground near the car. It is unclear whether this discovery is related to Drew's disappearance, but its presence is alarming. Inside the car, police found paperwork, a wallet, and a new wallet that Drew had purchased that day, suggesting that even if Drew had been in a threatening situation, it did not appear to be a robbery. Her friends, boyfriend, and parents had no idea where Drew might be. So police assumed it was a kidnapping. To begin with, police investigated her boyfriend Chris Lang, but quickly eliminated him as a suspect due to his location 300 miles from Grand Forks, Minnesota. Their conversations with Chris led them to discover that Drew had made 2 phone calls before she disappeared, the first of which was abruptly cut off, while the second call detected some noise. Police later found audio recordings from several hours after Drew's last call, which included wind and the sound of buttons being pressed. The next day, police went to the mall where Drew worked to review the security footage. Upon review, they found that there were no security cameras in the parking lot where Drew's car was parked. Fortunately, however, there were quite a few security cameras inside the mall. Police reviewing the footage found a key moment when Drew entered a local store after hours to purchase a purse. At the time, she appeared calm and unhurried, wearing a pink sweater and holding a jacket. Drew paid for her purchase at 4:55 p.m. and put on her jacket before leaving the store. When she got out, she called Chris, The call was recorded at exactly 5 p.m. Notably, the conversation between Drew and Chris ended abruptly 4 minutes later, at 5:04 p.m., after she said, "Okay, okay." To better understand the events surrounding the call, a police officer decided to conduct an experiment. He set a timer for 4 minutes and walked from the store to the parking lot where Drew's car was parked, simulating her likely route. When the timer went off, the officer was already close to the parking lot where Drew's car was found, suggesting that something may have happened as she approached or reached her car. Unfortunately, the lack of cameras in the parking lot made it difficult for the police to piece together what happened next. Drew's disappearance attracted widespread media attention, and many people decided to take action and volunteer their time to help find her. In addition to the police, more than 1,000 volunteers joined the search for Drew. The FBI also joined the investigation. Tracing Drew's last phone call led police to the small town of Fisher in nearby Minnesota, about a 30-minute drive from where Drew worked. A map of the area between the two towns shows a large area of farmland. To thoroughly search the area, police used a variety of methods and vehicles. These included helicopters, ATVs, horseback riders, and dogs. Local landowners were also asked to check their properties for information. However, these efforts initially yielded no significant leads. As the days passed, police expanded their search. On the fourth day, a breakthrough in the investigation was made when a single shoe was discovered under a bridge in the town of Crookston. A roommate recalled that Drew had been wearing the shoes the day she disappeared. This identification was later confirmed by forensic analysis, verifying that the shoe did indeed belong to Drew. Crookston, a small town of less than 10,000 residents, is about 30 miles from Grand Forks, where Drew went missing. Despite conducting additional searches in the Crookston area, police were unable to find any significant information to assist in the case. An initial reward of $20,000 was offered for information leading to Drew's whereabouts, later increased to $140,000. At this point, the only potential lead was surveillance footage from the Columbia Mall. Police again reviewed hundreds of hours of footage from various cameras, but this time they changed their focus. Instead of just looking for Drew, they speculated that her abductor may have been following her and could also be seen on the videos. Police reviewed the security footage for several hours before finding a suspect that caught their attention. A man wandered around the mall, not shopping and appearing to be more interested in observing the people around him than the merchandise. He eventually sat down on a bench near the mall exit at 3:41 p.m., where he continued to observe people passing by. About 10 minutes later, he put on black gloves and stood up from the bench. He then walked into the lobby, where a camera captured him as he looked up at the camera. This footage was recorded 72 minutes before Drew's conversation with her boyfriend was interrupted. After observing the man stand up from his bench and follow a blonde woman who passed him, who was carrying a grocery cart and heading toward the parking lot. Police did not consider this a coincidence. Instead, in their opinion, the man appeared to have chosen a suitable victim and followed her. The identity of this woman is unknown, but on that day, only Drew disappeared from the mall parking lot. Given the slight resemblance between Drew and the woman, this suspicious man further raised suspicions that he was involved in Drew's disappearance. The investigation into Drew's abduction led police to consider a suspect who was seen stalking a woman at the mall. If for some reason he did not abduct this woman, his next target could be Drew. She left the mall around 5 p.m. after dark. The timing could have worked in his favor. At this point in the investigation, there were 3 cities involved in the case: Grand Forks, where Drew was abducted; Fisher, where her phone was last active; and Crookston, where her shoe was found. With this data, the FBI began checking the records of all registered sex offenders from those cities and the surrounding area, comparing the photos from the records with the suspicious man from the mall. Only one man fit all the parameters, Alfonso Rodriguez, who had a history of repeated crimes against women. The 50-year-old had been in prison for the past 23 years. Alfonso was born the second of 5 children in Laredo, Texas, in February 1953 to immigrant laborers Dolores and Alfonso Rodriguez. His childhood was not a happy one, with his parents constantly criticizing him and having high expectations. His family moved frequently, moving from state to state for 15 years, before finally settling in Crookston in 1963. This constant moving contributed to Alfonso's growing sense of isolation, which was exacerbated by the fact that his primary language was Spanish, while English was primarily spoken at school. As a result, Alfonso struggled academically and eventually dropped out of school in the 9th grade. He then began working as a laborer at the American Sugar Company's refined sugar plant in Crookston. Alfonso claimed that he had been molested by older women as a child, which he believed led to him developing a hostility towards women. In October 1974, when he was 21, Alfonso asked a woman for a ride home but instead took her to a driveway in Crookston, where he attacked her, choked her, and attempted to force her to have sex with him. The following month, Alfonso approached another woman sitting in a van outside a cinema in Crookston, threatened her with a knife, and forced her to a secluded rural location, where he raped her. In 1979, Alfonso attempted to abduct a 69-year-old high school English teacher while she was walking at night in Crookston. When the woman resisted his attempts to force her into his car, Alfonso became enraged and stabbed her in the elbow and abdomen. However, she escaped and ran to safety. The victim drew a composite sketch of Alfonso that closely resembled him, leading to his arrest. He was convicted of attempted kidnapping and aggravated assault and sentenced to 23 years in prison. After serving his full sentence, Alfonso was released from prison in May 2003, just 6 months before Drew went missing. At the time of his release, Alfonso was registered as a level 3 sex offender, indicating a high risk of reoffending. His family expressed concern that he would reoffend after his release, but he was released from prison because he had completed his sentence. After his release, Alfonso moved in with his mother in Crookston, a town near the bridge where Drew's shoe was discovered. This was another piece of evidence that did not favor him. Police questioned Alfonso, who denied any involvement in Drew's disappearance. When asked about his whereabouts on the day of Drew's disappearance, Alfonso claimed that he had gone to a movie theater at the Columbia Mall to see the movie Once Upon a Time in Mexico. However, police later discovered that no movie theater in Grand Forks was showing that movie on the day Drew went missing. Police searched Alfonso's car and found evidence that led them to believe that Drew was unlikely to have survived. The police department began to focus their search efforts instead of their rescue efforts. In Alfonso's car, they found several dark red stains that forensic experts later confirmed were drops of Drew's blood. And blood and dirt were found on the back of the passenger seat. A knife found in the trunk matched the sheath found in the parking lot near Drew's car. Alfonso had purchased the knife from a hardware store near the parking lot where Drew disappeared. Police gathered enough evidence to charge Alfonso 8 days after Drew's disappearance. Alfonso Rodriguez was arrested on December 1, 2003. Despite the evidence, Alfonso maintained his innocence while in custody at the Grand Forks jail and refused to cooperate with the investigation or provide any information about Drew. During a pretrial hearing, Alfonso's bail was set at $5 million. Meanwhile, police continued to search for Drew in the area surrounding the 3 towns, despite difficult conditions due to heavy snowfall. In an unprecedented move, the governors of North Dakota and Minnesota pledged at a press conference on December 9 to assist in the search for Drew, and hundreds of members of the National Guard and other state personnel joined the search. However, despite these joint efforts, no progress was made, and the search was eventually suspended due to worsening weather conditions. In the spring, search efforts for Drew intensified as the winter snow began to melt. After 5 months of searching, Drew's body was finally found on April 17, 2004. The body was found in a field in Crookston, just a few miles from the bridge where the shoe was discovered. Drew's family was devastated by the heartbreaking discovery. The discovery confirmed their worst fears and would have a lasting impact on their lives. Notably, the field where the body was found was searched, but apparently because there was so much snow they were unable to find her body. Drew was found naked from the waist down, suggesting a clear motive for the crime. Her hands were tied behind her back, and a rope was wrapped around her neck with pieces of plastic bags left underneath. This suggested that the bag had originally been placed over Drew's head before being secured with a rope. Alfonso's hair was found on Drew's jacket. She had suffered severe beatings and multiple stab wounds before her death. According to the medical examiner, there were 3 possible causes of her death: neck trauma, asphyxiation, or hypothermia. After months of waiting, Drew's family was finally able to say goodbye to her at a ceremony on April 24, 2004. The event was attended by approximately 1,500 people. Drew was abducted in North Dakota, which abolished the death penalty in 1975. Likewise, Minnesota, where her body was discovered, does not have the death penalty. However, because Drew was transported across state lines, the crime was classified as a federal crime, giving the prosecutor's office the authority to pursue the death penalty against Alfonso. Alfonso Rodriguez, convicted on August 30, 2006, the jury recommended the death penalty, which was formally imposed by Judge Ralph Erickson on February 8, 2007. Alfonso became the first person to be sentenced to death in North Dakota in nearly 100 years. Alfonso spent 6 years on death row, and on June 28, 2013, Alfonso confessed that he was the one who kidnapped and killed Drew. However, the story does not end there. Ralph Erickson, the former district judge who sentenced Alfonso to death, became a judge on the United States Court of Appeals, and it was he who overturned his own conviction of Alfonso in 2021 and ordered a new sentencing phase. Alfonso's guilt was beyond doubt and was confirmed by various DNA tests. However, Judge Ralph Erickson was misled by the defense attorneys about not having Alfonso's mental health examined. Judge Ralph later overturned the death sentence, saying that the police had not examined Alfonso's mental health at the time of the crime, thus violating his constitutional rights. After Alfonso's original death sentence was overturned, the federal prosecutor's office initially announced that they would pursue the death penalty again. However, 2 years later, in 2023, prosecutors reversed their decision, accepting that Alfonso's sentence had been commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a public statement, United States Attorney Max Schneider announced that the United States government has withdrawn its intention to seek the death penalty against Alfonso Rodriguez. On June 22, 2013, it was reported that Alfonso Rodriguez had been transferred from death row in Terre Haute, Indiana, to the high-security Coleman II prison in Sumterville, Florida. This prison is likely to be his final place of incarceration. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jared Bridegon. Jared Bridegon was born in 1989 in Florida, to a modest family. He was the second of 2 sons, and he was very close to his older brother, Adam. His family was heavily involved with the Church of Jesus Christ of Saints. As Jared entered his teenage years, he met a girl named Mallory Bowden through the church. The two began a date relationship, with she considering Jared her first true love. However, their religious community discouraged living together before marriage, which caused Jared and Mallory to eventually separate. This occurred after Jared graduated from a high school in Florida in 2007. Then, he decided to pursue further education in another state. Jared moved to Utah for college, where he would meet his future first wife at a friend's birthday party. In 2009, Jared, then 20 years old, met Shauna Gardner, 22 years old, from a wealthy family. Shauna was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She was born in 1987 to parents Sterling and Shelley Gardner, who co-founded Stampin' Up!, a major company that produces and sells craft items. By 2010, the family business, based in Salt Lake City, generated an annual revenue of $100 million. She has a sister named Sarah, who holds a managerial position in the family business. Growing up in a wealthy family, Shauna enjoyed luxury and a life of leisure. She didn't work as a chef, despite being trained in that profession. People described her as enthusiastic but also a bit indecisive. Initially, Jared wasn't overly interested in her. However, Shauna made an effort to draw him in with her lavish lifestyle, suggesting they could travel the world and do as they pleased, thanks to her parents' financial support. The couple's relationship moved quickly. Just a few months after meeting, they got engaged. By early 2010, they had married in a lavish temple ceremony in Salt Lake City, Utah, the Shauna family covering all expenses. Their decision to marry quickly was influenced by their strong religious beliefs. After getting married, Shauna and Jared moved to Utah, where they bought a comfortable home, valued at around $1 million, with the help of the bride's parents. Each of them owned a Mercedes, despite Jared still being in school and Shauna not having a job. They took many luxurious trips around the world and often posted about their adventures, expensive buys, and hobbies on social media. Friends close to they said that Shauna's parents gave them about $10,000 each month for expenses and also let them use their accounts freely. Jared received a generous gift of $100,000 from his in-laws after completing his degree, which he used to start his own business. The following year, 2013, they welcomed a set of twins, a daughter named Abigail and a son named Liam. Initially, the family resided in Connecticut, but they soon relocated after Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues. The move was recommended by doctors, who advised that a coastal location would be beneficial for Liam's health. The Jared family consequently settled in Florida, purchasing a comfortable two-story home near the coastline in Ponte Vedra Beach, south of Jacksonville. During this time, Shauna managed her social media blog, where she presented herself as a loving wife and caring mother. Jared and Shauna were a couple who took fitness seriously, often visiting the gym together. Noticing his wife's dedication, Jared decided to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. However, soon after they relocated, the couple faced significant marital issues. Even so, they still choose to save face and pretend that everything is fine. Shauna's feelings about their religion began to shift. She lost interest and nearly stopped attending church services, while Jared still stands his ground. This difference in faith and devotion caused ongoing tension and arguments. Furthermore, Shauna's perception of Jared had also changed. She felt he had become lazy, gained weight, and lacked focus on starting his business. Jared completed online courses in programming and design. He then got a job at Microsoft, which helped him gain financial independence. Over time, he advanced to a senior manager position. However, his relationship with his wife began to deteriorate, and frequent arguments became a common occurrence in their home. The situation worsened when Jared discovered intimate conversations between his wife and her fitness trainer, causing him to suspect they were having an affair with each other. Although his wife denied this, the coach confirmed Jared's suspicions via phone call. Jared then contacted his friend, Meller Bowden, via email, lamenting that his wife had become distant from him and increasingly attached to her fitness trainer. Despite this, he expressed his desire to forgive her and work through their issues for the sake of their children. Unfortunately, their efforts to repair the relationship were unsuccessful. In 2015, after nearly 6 years of marriage, the couple began a contentious divorce, battling over shared assets and child custody. Jared publicly accused Shauna of being unfaithful, which she vehemently denied, claiming instead that the marriage had lost its love. In turn, she accused Jared of being cruel and behaving offensively. A dispute between Shauna and Jared led to disagreements over the division of assets and custody of their twin children. Shauna claimed that most of their possessions, including their home, cars, and bank account funds, were gifts or purchased by her parents. She believed Jared had no claim to these items because he had only recently started working after spending years on his education. Jared countered that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home, citing his contributions over the years. Shauna and Jared also had intense disputes about the custody of their twins. Shauna accused Jared of manipulating the children against her when he was with them, coaching them on what to say about she and recording their statements to use as evidence in court. In response, Jared accused she of snooping on his private life by installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and tracking his movements. Shauna sought sole custody of the children and sole ownership of their seaside home. She also accused Jared of attempting to withdraw from the children's trust funds for his own use. He retaliated by accusing of tax evasion and claiming that she received thousands of dollars in income working at the family company without paying taxes. By the end of 2015, the court had awarded Jared and Shauna joint custody of their children, but this decision did not bring an end to their disputes. Despite their divorce being finalized, they continued to engage in lengthy court battles for nearly 7 more years, leading to a tragic outcome. During this time, both Jared and Shauna had new families and having more children. Jared met Christina, a fellow Microsoft employee from North Carolina, in 2016. At first, they were just friends, but eventually developed into a dating relationship. A few months later, Christina relocated to Florida to be with Jared. In the fall of 2017, Jared and Christina got married. In February 2019, they had a daughter named Bexley. They then had a son named London in August 2021. Around the same time, Shauna also married again in 2018 to a man named Mario Fernandez who owned a real estate business. Mario was a year her junior. In 2018, Shauna and Mario had a son named Michael. They later moved into the house where Shauna used to live with her ex-husband, Jared. Jared and Shauna's ongoing conflict continued despite both having started new families. They still filed lawsuits against each other, making new demands. One major point of contention was Jared's insistence that if Shauna was not present, her new husband Mario should not be allowed to be with their twins, Abigail and Liam. Simultaneously, he also seeking greater involvement for his new wife Christina in raising Abigail and Liam. On the other hand, Shauna alleged that Jared was trying to humiliate her by not allowing her to use the larger, safer family vehicle to transport the children. Their last court meeting, which took place 4 months before Jared's death, was exceptionally tense. Both parties leveled new accusations, and their property rights continued to be a point of dispute. Following their divorce, a court ruling granted Shauna exclusive use of the larger vehicle and required Jared to pay her $600 in compensation. Jared would pick up Abigail and Liam every Wednesday to spend time together. They would meet for dinner, with their younger sister Bexley occasionally joining them. On Wednesday, February 22, 2022, Jared followed their routine. He picked up Abigail and Liam, took them to a coastal cafe for dinner, and then they went for a walk. After that, he took his 2 children to Shauna's house and headed home via his usual route, which took about 40 minutes. Part of this route included a deserted and poorly lit stretch of road. As Jared drove slowly in the dark, aware that his 3-year-old daughter, Bexley, was asleep in her car seat, he suddenly spotted a tire in his lane. It was around 9 p.m. Jared stopped the car, turned on his hazard lights, and got out to move the tire to the side of the road. Then several shots rang out. Jared didn't have time to react because the shooter acted with precision, firing multiple bullets at close range and later fleeing the scene. Bexley was not injured or harmed in this incident. A passerby witnessed the aftermath of the shooting and cautiously approached Jared's body, which was lying in a pool of blood. The passerby immediately called for police and paramedics, but unfortunately, they arrived too late to save Jared. The investigation began with a suspicious timeline. Just before the incident, Jared had called his wife, Christina, to let her know he was on his way home. However, when Jared didn't arrive after an hour, Christina tried calling him again, this time reaching a police officer who informed her of the incident and asked her to report to the Jacksonville Beach Police Station. The police investigation at the scene revealed that Jared's car had stopped due to a tire on the road. They concluded that Jared had exited his vehicle to remove the obstacle, at which point he was shot. Fortunately, Bexley, who was asleep in the back seat, was unharmed, suggesting that she was not the target of the shooter. The fact that Jared's wallet, phone, and tablet were still in the vehicle, with no valuables missing, led investigators to quickly rule out robbery as a motive. Christina was asked if her husband had any known enemies or recent conflicts. She said she didn't know of anyone who wanted to harm him, except possibly his first wife, Cheyenne. However, she didn't want to make any direct accusations without solid proof. The police couldn't find any surveillance footage of the incident because there were no cameras in the area where it happened. A witness did hear the shots. Then they did hear a vehicle speeding away, and they couldn't see anything in the dark. Christina suggested that Cheyenne was involved in the crime, a theory that seemed possible to investigators. However, investigators suspect Cheyenne had an accomplice, as she had an alibi at the time of the crime. She was at home with Mario, Abigail, and Liam, Michael, and visiting parents at the time of the incident. To gather more evidence, the police reviewed nearby surveillance footage. To further investigate, detectives checked the footage from nearby surveillance cameras. The footage showed a dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident occurred. The same vehicle was seen again on camera a few minutes after the witness reported hearing shots. Jared's family made public appeals asking anyone with information, no matter how small, about the case to come forward. The police arrested Cheyenne and her current husband, Mario, as their first suspects. Despite multiple questioning sessions, they both denied any involvement in the murder. Cheyenne acknowledged that her relationship with Jared was complicated, but insisted she would never harm him. In an emotional interview, Shauna shared how Abigail and Liam reacted to the news of Jared's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam was in shock and remained silent for a long time. A notable absence at Jared's funeral was that of his ex-wife Cheyenne and older children, Abigail and Liam. When Christina told Shauna that didn't want her at the ceremony, Shauna responded that if she couldn't attend, neither would their children. Almost a year after the murder, in January 2023, the first suspect was finally arrested. Before that, the police have remained silent on the progress of the investigation, only admitting that a lot of time and resources are needed. A new clue has been found when a dark blue Ford F-150, possibly related to the case, caused an accident and then fled in a crowded area. Fortunately, numerous cameras in the vicinity captured footage, allowing authorities to quickly identify the suspect. The vehicle was owned by 62 years old Henry Tennant, an unemployed man with a history of convictions. Henry was subsequently charged with multiple offenses, including second-degree premeditated murder using a firearm, participating in a conspiracy to commit murder, and setting up an ambush to obstruct the victim. Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Jonathan Paul Smith and City Prosecutor Melissa Nelson held a press conference to announce the charges against Henry. During the conference, it was revealed that Henry was not the only one involved. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he had agreed to testify against his accomplices. However, their names were not disclosed to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Henry with his friend had been living in a rental house owned by Mario. The police questioned Henry's housemate, but he did not have any valuable information about the case. Although he lived with Henry, the housemate had no personal relationship with the owner, Mario, only paying rent through a middleman, Henry. A thorough search of the house led to a significant discovery: a hidden pistol in Henry's room. Ballistic tests later confirmed that this pistol was the murder weapon, further implicating Henry in the crime. Mario Fernandez was arrested on March 16, 2023, after his accomplice, Henry, pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against him. Mario was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. Rumors soon emerged that Shauna was the mastermind behind the murder. These allegations were supported by two key witnesses: her former lover, a fitness trainer, and a tattoo artist she regularly visited. The fitness trainer revealed that Shauna said that she really hates her ex-husband, Jared, and had wished for his death. The tattoo artist shared a similar account, stating that Shauna had complained about the ongoing legal battles with Jared and had inquired about potential ways to silence him permanently. Shauna initially made the inquiry in a joking manner, but she repeated it months later, showing her serious intent. Despite denying all allegations and initially stating her to cooperate with the investigation, but Shauna moved to Washington with her children a few months after Mario's arrest. On August 17, 2023, Shauna was arrested in her Washington apartment and was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and incitement to commit a serious crime. She was extradited to Florida to stand trial alongside Mario and the other suspects. It is believed that Shauna's motive stemmed from her complicated relationship with Jared, as well as the desire to avoid sharing custody of their two children and the desire to have complete control over shared assets. The case is ongoing and charges are being pursued against everyone involved. Henry, an individual associated with the case, has pleaded guilty and is cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. Even so, he faces a minimum sentence of 15 years in prison, which would be life-altering given his advanced age. Mario Fernandez, Shauna's husband and a co-conspirator, has partially admitted his guilt, but refusing to testify against his wife. In contrast, Shauna denies all charges. However, prosecutors are asking for the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole for both Shauna Gardner and Mario Fernandez Saldana. Meanwhile, their three children are in the care of their maternal grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, and their aunt, Sarah. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Becky Bleefnick. Becky and Tim met while studying at Quincy University. Becky majored in biology and loved tennis. Tim was an excellent football player, popular in school. Those close to Tim commented that he was a cheerful, innocent, and friendly guy. Tim always greeted everyone with a warm hug. With an enthusiastic and friendly personality, Tim was very loved by his friends. On the other hand, Becky's friends described her as a cheerful person, capable of making the surrounding atmosphere bright and positive just by her presence. With her positive energy and bright smile, Becky easily made a good impression on everyone around her. Both Becky and Tim were attractive people, and they seemed to complement each other perfectly. The combination of attractive appearance and compatible personalities made them an ideal couple in the eyes of everyone. 2 years after graduating from Quincy University, Becky and Tim decided to get married and start a new phase in their lives. Being a practical couple, they prioritized saving money over spending. Instead of buying an engagement ring and planning a lavish honeymoon, they decided to use their savings to put a down payment on their first home. Becky had dreamed of becoming a doctor, but ultimately did not pursue this career. Although she loved medicine, Becky felt a stronger calling to motherhood. She longed to experience the joy and happiness of motherhood. This dream came true when she and her husband Tim had 3 sons. Becky loved spending quality time with her children and watching them grow up. As her children grew older, Becky decided to pursue her own dreams. She chose to go back to school to get her nursing degree. On the other hand, Tim has always been a performer, from his time in community theater in Quincy to creating comedic videos on social media. He has the ability to captivate audiences with his humor and charisma. In 2008, Tim decided to challenge himself by entering the competition American Gladiators. Although he did not make it to the final round, he tried his best and made it to the final audition round of the show. In September 2019, Tim took a new opportunity to attract attention and showcase his talent. The production team of the popular TV show Family Feud invited Tim and his family to participate. However, Becky could not join him because she was attending nursing school. Determined to make the most of the opportunity to participate in the show, Tim gathered his family, including his parents and brothers. Family Feud is a television game show where 2 families compete against each other by guessing the most popular answer from a survey of 100 people. Steve Harvey, the famous host of Family Feud, asked Tim, "What do you think is the most popular answer to the question, 'What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?'" Tim, known for his sense of humor, surprised Steve Harvey in the audience with his clever answer. He said, "Honey, I love you, but said I do." This statement was shocking and made the whole studio laugh. Although this answer was not expected, it still won second place on the leaderboard, earning Tim and his family many points. The Bleefnick family competed on Family Feud for 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000. The prize money was divided equally among the family members. There was one notable exception, however. Tim did not share his reward with his wife, Becky. After many years of marriage, Becky and Tim's relationship began to strain. When Becky decided to become a nurse, Tim strongly objected. He said he was worried about Becky's health because nursing was often a high-stress job. Tim also noticed that Becky often had difficulty controlling her patience and stress when caring for the children. This made him worry about her ability to handle the job of a nurse. However, Becky's friends had a different view of Tim's reaction. They believed that Tim did not want Becky to be independent and free to pursue her own interests. Over time, they noticed that Becky was no longer as happy in the marriage as she had been before. Things were going well for the first 5 years, but then Tim began to act more controlling and manipulative towards Becky. Becky's friends noticed that while Becky was putting a lot of effort into her studies and nursing work, Tim was not contributing his fair share to the household chores. Tim did not participate in cleaning and taking care of their son. Instead, he left Becky to shoulder all the household chores after her long, tiring shifts at the hospital. Becky noticed that their marriage was struggling and wanted to work on this with Tim. She suggested that the 2 of them go to marriage counseling, hoping that this would help them improve the situation and mend their relationship. However, Tim refused this proposal, leaving Becky feeling disappointed. Although Becky tried her best to save their marriage, Tim had other intentions. In January 2012, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce from Becky. This decision shocked Becky, as she had shown determination and effort to maintain the relationship. However, Tim's intentions were clear. He moved out of the house and into a new place on the other side of town. Tim explained that the main reason for his decision to divorce was due to the change in Becky's personality after she became a nurse. He found that her new career had significantly affected her behavior, causing a negative impact on their marriage. The divorce process was stressful. Tim and Becky could not find common ground and their relationship more deteriorated. During the divorce proceedings, Tim and Becky fought over a number of issues, including child custody, property division, and alimony. The situation became so tense that Tim filed for a protective order against Becky. He accused her of stalking and harassing him. Tim cited one specific incident. During an parent-teacher, Becky became aggressive and argued with him. As evidence, Tim provided a cell phone video of Becky banging on his car door outside the school after the conference. Becky, however, had a different view of the situation. She believed that Tim was the one who was harassing her. Becky texted her friends to share her concerns. In the messages, she described multiple instances of Tim's violent behavior, including yelling at her, pushing her in front of the children, and throwing things around the house. Becky sent a text message to a friend, expressing her deep concern about Tim's mental health. She noticed that Tim was becoming more hostile and unpredictable. Recently, a co-worker of Becky's was murdered by her partner, which made her even more fearful for her safety. Becky began to suspect that Tim might harm her, similar to what had happened to her co-worker. As a result, Becky sent a text message to her sister, saying that if anything happened to her, Tim would be the one to pay the most attention. Becky was worried that Tim would use force to gain custody of their child. This message made Becky's sister very worried about her sister's safety. She understood that Becky's fears were justified and that Becky needed immediate help. Out of concern for Becky's safety, her sister convinced her to seek help from the Domestic Violence Support Center. After some consideration, Becky decided to file for a protective order against Tim. After reviewing both Tim and Becky's requests for protective orders, the judge decided not to grant either of them. Instead, the judge ordered them to stay away from each other's homes, except to exchange custody of their children. On February 22, Becky and Tim's 3 sons, ages 12, 10, and 5, stayed overnight at Tim's house. Tim's house is about a mile from where Becky lives. The divorce proceedings between Becky and Tim are expected to be finalized within the next week. The next day, Tim called Becky's father. He explained that he had been unable to reach Becky and that she had not picked up her sons from school as usual. Becky's father, knowing that his daughter was devoted to her children, realized that something serious must have happened that had left Becky unable to perform her duties as a mother. Concerned about Becky's health, her father drove to her house immediately. When he arrived, he entered the house and walked through the rooms, calling Becky's name. Receiving no response, he went upstairs and entered his daughter's bedroom. Inside, he witnessed a horrifying scene: Becky lying motionless in a pool of blood, her body covered in gunshot wounds. Investigators arrived at Becky's house after her father discovered her body in the bathroom. Becky's body was lying on her back, covered in blood and showing no signs of life. Investigators began their investigation by thoroughly inspecting the exterior of the home. After a thorough search, they determined that the suspect had entered the home by forcing open an upstairs window in a child's bedroom. This discovery revealed that the suspect had used a porch chair to gain easy access to the home and onto the roof. Investigators followed the trail they believed the suspect had taken. They headed toward Becky's bedroom, where the door appeared to have been kicked in or forcefully broken. The damage to the bedroom door indicated that the suspect had entered the room, most likely to look for Becky. Evidence indicated that Becky attempted to hide in the bathroom, but the suspect followed and caught up with her. The suspect eventually shot Becky in the bathroom. While examining the crime scene around the bathroom where Becky's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. When investigators examined Becky's phone, they found a call to 91126 at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped them develop a theory about what happened that night. They believe that while being chased by the suspect in her home, Becky tried to call 911 for help, but in a panic, she mistakenly dialed 91126. Before Becky could call 911 again, investigators believe that the suspect grabbed the phone from her. The mistaken call occurred at 1:11 a.m., so they think Becky may have been murdered around that time. However, when police investigated Becky's neighborhood, no one remembered hearing any strange noises at that time. This raised suspicions for investigators. Since Becky had multiple gunshot wounds, it was unlikely that no one heard anything. When investigators thoroughly searched Becky's home, they quickly determined that the murder was not a burglary, as nothing was missing. However, the perpetrator left behind a number of important pieces of evidence. Most notably, a partial shoe print was found near the entrance. This shoe print could help identify the make and model of the suspect's shoes, as well as provide information about the size and shape of their feet. At the scene, investigators found 8 9mm bullet casings and several small pieces of plastic scattered on the floor near Becky's body. Despite the extensive evidence collected, investigators were still unable to come to a definitive conclusion. Therefore, they decided to send the collected evidence to a forensic lab for further analysis. Detectives are investigating whether any of Becky's neighbors had installed security cameras outside their homes. They discovered that a neighbor had installed a camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year ago. The camera was facing the neighbor's driveway, which bordered Becky's house. It was set up to detect motion and send an alert to the homeowner. However, on the night of Becky's death, the camera did not capture any important footage. As they investigated further, investigators discovered that on the day of the murder, a man was seen walking down the back path of Becky's house at 1:05 a.m. on the security camera footage. About 48 minutes later, the man was seen walking back in the opposite direction. Becky's neighbor's security camera also recorded a similar incident about a week earlier. On February 14th, footage from the neighbor's security camera showed Becky seeing a dark figure lurking around her house. After discovering this, Becky's neighbor immediately informed her of the news. After the neighbor reported the mysterious stranger, Becky began to feel anxious. Although she had not seen anyone on her house, she had heard noises in her backyard the night before, which frightened her. Police reviewed security camera footage from Becky's neighbors and continued to search the neighborhood for additional footage. They found video from a home near the Quiney bus stop that showed a bicyclist wearing dark clothing moving toward Becky's home. The videos showed a bicyclist wearing dark clothing, matching the description of the mystery person in the footage of Becky's driveway. After analyzing the time of the footage, detectives suspected that the bicyclist was the person in the footage. Although Becky's neighbor's security cameras did not capture the mystery person on the night of her murder, police did stumble upon footage of a bicyclist heading toward Becky's home shortly before and after the incident. The video footage showed a person matching the description of the person lurking in Becky's driveway before she was murdered. While the video was helpful to the investigation, the poor quality of the footage made it difficult to gather details. Detectives were unable to determine the gender or identity of the person in the video due to the graininess of the image. However, they did notice one important detail: the bicycle the person was riding appeared to have no reflectors on its wheels. When Becky was murdered, her sister immediately thought of Tim, Becky's soon-to-be ex-husband, as a possible suspect. She had witnessed their tense divorce and shared this thought with the detectives investigating the case. Based on this information, the police began to consider Tim as the prime suspect. Notably, the murder occurred just a week before Becky and Tim finalized their divorce, making the situation particularly suspicious. During the investigation of Becky's murder, investigators made an important discovery. They found a bicycle without reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on the security camera, just a block away from Tim's house. This discovery raised suspicions about Tim, prompting detectives to seek a search warrant for his home. When police executed the search warrant, Tim was cooperative and respectful. He willingly stood outside the home with the officers while investigators searched his property. On March 13, 2023, Tim was arrested and charged with Becky's murder 2 weeks earlier. When Tim's mugshot was released, Becky's family and friends were shocked by his appearance. Instead of the well-groomed man they knew, they saw a completely different Tim, unkempt and seemingly frail. Many believe that this change reflected the negative impact that the divorce had had on Tim. His unkempt hair and shabby clothes were a clear sign of the deterioration in his previously well-groomed appearance. The divorce was blamed for Tim's declining physical and mental health, according to friends and family. However, Tim explained that he had grown his hair long to take part in a charity campaign to raise awareness for cancer research. A clip from the Family Feud show in which Tim said he wished he had not married his wife when he was arrested for murdering her caused a stir. Many people saw this reaction as an uncanny sign of Tim's true feelings for his wife. Some even suggested it was a warning sign of potential problems in their relationship. Investigators carefully examined Tim's phone and discovered that he had created a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During the investigation, they discovered that Tim had been looking to buy a bicycle on Facebook. He was particularly interested in a blue Schwinn without reflectors on the wheels. This was notable because it matched the description of the bike found abandoned near Tim's home, just a block away. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Tim, convicting him was difficult. Tim was held without bail and ordered a speedy trial, requiring the prosecution to bring the case to trial within 90 days of his arrest. However, the prosecution faced a major challenge in convincing a jury of Tim's guilt due to the lack of two key elements that are often considered decisive in criminal cases: a confession and DNA evidence. Without these two elements, proving Tim's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt became very difficult. In prosecuting Tim for his wife's murder, the prosecution faced a major challenge. 3 months after Becky was murdered in their home, Tim appeared in court on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the state presented evidence that investigators had collected at the scene. A key piece of evidence was the plastic debris found around Becky's body. The prosecution claimed that it was from an Aldi grocery bag. They also told the jury that several similar bags were found during a subsequent search of Tim's home. The prosecution alleged that Tim used the Aldi plastic bag as a silencer when he shot his ex-wife multiple times in order to muffle the sound of the gunfire and avoid detection. They claimed that Tim left DNA on the bags. An expert who testified said it was highly likely that the DNA found on the bags belonged to Tim. Prosecutors presented evidence to the jury about a crowbar found in Tim's basement that they believed could have been used to pry open a window at the victim's home on the night of her murder. However, an expert testified that although there were some slight similarities between the marks on the window and the crowbar, she could not say for certain that the crowbar was used in the crime. The prosecution presented several new pieces of evidence to bolster its case. They presented searches that Tim had conducted on his phone, including how to open a door with a crowbar, how to make a silencer for a homemade pistol, how to clean gunpowder off his hands, and the average response time for Quincy police. An expert was called to testify that she had compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to the shell casings found in Tim's home. She determined that 27 of the shell casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used in the murder. When investigators searched Tim's home, they did not find Becky's 9mm gun. Tim claimed that he had not seen the gun for months before Becky was killed. During the trial, the defense did not call any witnesses. After a 6-day trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before finding Tim guilty. Ultimately, Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Although Tim maintained his innocence and planned to appeal, Becky's family believed the sentence was deserved. Becky's sister spoke to Tim about the consequences of his actions on his sons, emphasizing that his choices had caused them pain. Even though Becky is gone, her sister promises to keep her memory alive in the hearts of her 3 sons. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Polly Klaas. Polly Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California. She lived with her parents, Mark and Eva, and her younger sister Annie. When Polly was very young, her parents divorced. Afterwards, Polly, her younger sister, and their mother moved to Petaluma, California. Mark has started a new relationship after he and Eva divorced, and Polly gets along well with her father's new partner. After her parents got divorced, Polly made a conscious effort to maintain a good relationship with both her mother and father, helping to keep the peace within the family. As a child, Polly was described as quiet and innocent. Although she had few friends and was generally shy, she excelled in theater. Polly actively participated in school plays, community musicals, and often secured lead roles. Her passion for theater fueled her dream of becoming a talented actress in the musical theater field. Besides, Polly also enjoys having sleepovers at friends' houses or inviting them to her house. These sleepovers are usually with her close group of friends. On October 1, 1993, Polly invited 2 friends, Jillian and Kate, to her home for a sleepover. Her mother, Eva, agreed to let the girls spend the night. That evening, the 3 girls had dinner and spent the first few hours together without incident. When Eva started feeling unwell with a bad headache, she decided to go to bed around 9:45 p.m. and asked the girls to wake her if they needed anything. Eva later said she took 2 sleeping pills and fell asleep after 11 p.m. She was suddenly awakened by Jillian and Kate screaming. The girls frantically told Eva that Polly had been taken by a man who broke into the house. Eva immediately called the police and then checked on her other daughter, Annie. She was in the room, and she didn't seem to know what was going on. When the police arrived, they questioned Jillian and Kate. According to the girls, they had been in Polly's room playing, trying on different costumes for Halloween. It was around 11 p.m. when Polly suggested it was bedtime, and her friends concurred. And when Polly went to get the inflatable bed from her mother, she met a man standing at the door. The man held a knife and was not wearing a mask. But since we're approaching Halloween, the girls initially thought it was a joke and started laughing. However, they quickly realized the situation was not a joke at all. A man forcefully entered a house and became enraged when the 3 girls inside began to laugh. In a fit of anger, he restrained Jillian and Kate by tying their hands and feet and then demanded to know who lived in the house. Each girl replied that it was Polly. The man then proceeded to cover Jillian and Kate's heads with pillowcases and instructed them to count to 1,000. He told them that he would temporarily take Polly away, but promised to return her shortly. However, once Jillian and Kate realized the man had left the house, they tried to free themselves, which took approximately half an hour. They left the room and immediately informed Eva that Polly was missing and that a man had taken her. They reported the incident to the police, providing a brief description of the man. This allowed the officers to create a sketch of the suspect to aid in the search. Unfortunately, there was limited evidence found at the scene. A few footprints were discovered, but they all belonged to Polly, Eva, Annie, or friends who had visited the house in the days leading up to the incident. Some fabric fibers found on the carpet in Polly's room were significantly different from those in the carpet at her home. Analysis revealed that they belonged to a car's carpet. Police searched cars belonging to people the family knew but found no match, leading them to believe the fibers came from the kidnapper's car. A palm print was also found, but it couldn't be matched to anyone in the databases at the time because fingerprinting and DNA technology weren't advanced enough. However, the print was saved for possible comparison to a suspect in the future. In addition to the fibers, a piece of fabric resembling silk was found in Polly's room. It appeared to have been cut from a garment with scissors and had a unique pattern. The police believed this could be a valuable piece of evidence in the future. A hair was also found, but its origin was unknown. The DNA technology weren't developed at the time prevented analysis, making it impossible to determine who the hair belonged to. The search for Polly was one of the largest in United States history at that time, with many volunteers joining in. Around 4,000 people, including police and volunteers, searched her neighborhood, vacant lots, and nearby estates for Polly. The police attempted to find the driver who resembled the sketch, but were unsuccessful. Time was of the essence, as police hoped to find Polly within 24 hours of her disappearance, after which it would be highly unlikely to find her alive. The investigation was handed over to the FBI, who also actively worked to find Polly as soon as possible. However, as each day passes, the chances of finding her alive diminish. The police asked people who lived nearby if they saw or heard anything unusual on the night Polly was abducted. Several neighbors reported seeing a suspicious man wandering around the neighborhood. Although he looked unusual, at the time, he did not cause any concern, so they did not contact the emergency services. It wasn't until police showed the neighbors the sketch of suspect, they realized it was the same person. To gather more information about Polly's disappearance, police interviewed every teacher and staff member at the school she attended. They focused on whether anyone knew the suspect or had any details about Polly's situation. However, none of them had any knowledge about the incident, and everyone had an alibi for the time of the incident. Additionally, none of the school staff matched the suspect's description. In their investigation, the police went as far as comparing fibers found at Polly's home with the car mats of the school staff's vehicles. But all of them do not coincide. With each passing day, the sense of desperation among the family, the authorities, and the public grew. They feared that the kidnapper posed a threat to society. This added to the urgency for the police to solve the case. A $200,000 reward was offered for any information that could help locate Polly. The reward was sponsored by actress Winona Ryder, who also held a press conference calling on the public to pray for Polly's safe return. Also, Polly's case happened in 1993, a time when the internet was still in its early stages of development. Law enforcement agencies, including the police and the FBI, were not yet familiar with using the internet to disseminate information or search for missing persons. 3 people from California took matters into their own hands and posted information about Polly on the internet. This included a picture of Polly, a sketch of her suspected kidnapper, and a reward advertisement for any useful clues. At the time, there was no social media. But the information still managed to spread and reach approximately 25 million people in the US. FBI investigators believe that social media can play a significant role in their investigation into Polly's disappearance. Although a large number of people are following the case online, but no clues from internet users could help solve the case. Nevertheless, the campaign has attracted a large number of volunteers and several call centers have been set up to handle the volume of calls received each day. As a result, families of other missing children reached out to the Polly family for support, hoping to find their own children too. It had been weeks since Polly's abduction, and investigators were growing increasingly frustrated. They had no new leads and had yet to identify the kidnapper, making DNA comparisons impossible. Just when things seemed bleak, Polly's father, Mark, received a phone call from a girl claiming to be Polly. She explained that she was at a hotel and that her kidnapper had temporarily left her alone, allowing her to make the call. The girl then hung up, and Mark immediately informed the police. Unfortunately, the FBI did not have tools to trace the call at the time, so they had to wait for another call, in the hoping it would give them the opportunity to trace the kidnapper's location. A few hours later, the second call came. It was the same girl who had spoken to Mark earlier. The police were able to trace this call but were surprised to find that it did not lead to a hotel, as the girl had claimed, but rather to a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived at the house from which the call was made, they discovered it was a prank call made by a teenage girl around the same age as Polly. The girl's voice was similar to Polly's, which was the reason behind the confusion. According to her, her friends had dared her to make the call. She wasn't arrested or taken to the police station, but her parents were asked to control her behavior and advise her against making such serious and false claims in the future. On November 28, 1993, about 2 months after Polly's disappearance, a woman contacted the police to report finding 3 suspicious items on her large plot of land. Upon further investigation by the police and FBI, they discovered 3 crucial pieces of evidence: a piece of silk identical to the one found in Polly's room, a pair of ballet ties that Eva reported missing on the night of Polly's disappearance, and duct tape. This led the police to speculate that Polly was likely in the area. The FBI uncovered more information that shed light on the case. On the day Polly went missing, the same woman had reported to the police that strangers had been frequently visiting her plot of land. The property didn't have a fence around it, despite signs indicating it was private. As a result, many strangers unknowingly trespassed on the land, with the owner often encountering intruders. However, one incident stood out, especially considering it occurred on the night Polly was abducted. On that evening, a man in a car drove onto the property, but his vehicle got stuck in the mud. The nanny, who looking after the homeowner's son, was the first to see the man but was too scared to approach him. The owner also chose not to approach the man due to a fierce look in his eyes, so they decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they questioned the man, who claimed he was unaware he was on private property and promised to leave immediately. However, he asked for help pulling his car out of the mud. The police observed that the man was visibly nervous and sweating, appearing to be under the influence of a substance. But they were unable to administer a drug test and couldn't arrest him since he wasn't being violent. Finally, the policeman helped him get the car out of the mud, and the man drove away. The man's name was Richard Allen Davis, born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. Richard's childhood was marked by violence at the hands of his parents, particularly when he was 12 years old. This led to his parents' separation, and his mother completely disowned him, stating she wanted nothing to do with her son and leaving him in the care of his father. Richard's father was highly irresponsible, often leaving the house for extended periods of time, sometimes days, and leaving Richard alone. Richard sometimes stayed with neighbors or would seek out relatives. Richard started committing crimes when he was a teenager. He started stealing, got into fights, and spent several months in a reformatory school. At the age of 17, he committed a violent robbery that almost resulted in the death of the victim. The judge offered Richard 2 options: reform school or joining the U.S. Army. Richard chose to join the Army, but he was unable to maintain good behavior. As a result, he was dishonorably discharged after serving for less than 2 years. When Richard was approximately 20 years old, he was convicted of robbery, kidnapping, and received a 15-year sentence. However, due to good behavior, he was paroled after serving just 1 year. During that time, Richard was haunted by another charge. Many of Richard's friends believed he had killed a 19-year-old woman named Marlene, despite the police determining she had left willingly. Marlene's close friends suspected Richard was the culprit responsible for her death the night they attended a party together. Nonetheless, these allegations remained unsubstantiated rumors at the time. Richard was in financial trouble, and as such, he did not have a permanent home, leaving it unknown where he actually lived. The police issued an internal warning to officers, advising them to exercise extreme caution when interacting with him. Fearing Richard might flee California or even the United States, the authorities chose not to share any information with the media. Richard was ultimately arrested on November 13, 1993. He was driving under the influence and was stopped by a police officer. A breathalyzer test was administered, which Richard failed. Richard matching the suspect's description in the Polly Klaas kidnapping case. The police carefully approached Richard and arrested him for violating his probation due to he had violated his alcohol level while driving. However, the real reason for the arrest was the kidnapping. At the police station, Richard's true identity was revealed, and he was informed that he was under arrest in connection with the Polly Klaas kidnapping case. During the interrogation, Richard initially denied the charges but ultimately confessed to the crime. Further evidence, including a palm print matching the one found at the scene and fabric fibers from his car's carpet matching those found Polly's house, supported Richard's guilt. When questioned, Polly Klaas' friends identified Richard as the kidnapper. Moreover, an identical piece of fabric was found in Richard's car and on piece of land of the woman who had called the police, providing additional evidence against him. The suspect eventually admitted to the crime after much evidence pointed to his guilt. Richard claimed that on the day of the incident, he had been using legal substances with friends and was not feeling well. Despite this, he decided to commit a burglary and drove to a neighborhood where he spotted a house with an open window. He climbed in through the window, searching for valuables, and was about to leave when he encountered Polly. She was extremely frightened, and Richard made the decision to abduct her. He put Polly in the back seat of his car and drove to a secluded area, where he sexually assaulted her. After this, he got back in the driver's seat and continued driving. Eventually, Richard's car got stuck in the mud on private property, where a woman and her babysitter saw him with Polly in the back seat. The police arrived to help him, pulling the car out of the mud. Tragically, after they assisted him, Richard drove away and strangled Polly to death. He later revealed to the police the location of her body and them to begin a search. On December 4, 1993, approximately 2 months after Polly Klaas's disappearance, her body was discovered in a grave by the side of a highway, which was dug by Richard. A forensic examination was conducted and confirmed that the cause of Polly's death was strangulation, which was consistent with Richard's previous statements. The estimated date of death was roughly consistent with the day she went missing. With this evidence, Richard went on trial for kidnapping, murder, and rape. During the trial, Richard was given the opportunity to say a few words. In his statement, he apologized to Polly's family but also made the shocking accusation that her father had been sexually abusing her. According to Richard, Polly told him that her father's actions towards her were something Richard should not have done to her. This accusation angered Polly's father to the point that he became violent and was restrained by several people in the courtroom to prevent him from attacking Richard. Everyone was shocked by Richard's words, mainly because he showed no remorse for his statement, and many suspected that Polly's father had abused her. Despite no evidence to prove it, Richard was found guilty of Polly Klaas kidnapping and murder on June 18, 1996, subsequently received a death sentence in August. He attempted to appeal but was unsuccessful. In 2006, Richard was found unresponsive in his cell after overdosing on pills, but was revived and returned to prison. Richard's lawyer made an unsuccessful attempt to appeal the conviction to the Supreme Court in 2009. The Supreme Court upheld Richard's death sentence, with his attorney indicating plans to file further appeals. These ongoing appeals have led to a prolonged stay on death row. It is anticipated that once the appeals process concludes, the execution will proceed. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown, born in 1979, is an energetic and vibrant woman. She has the ability to spread positive energy to those around her through her optimistic attitude and way of life. People who know her often wonder how she can do so much and still maintain such a positive spirit. But in fact, her positive energy comes from being a mother, a role that she always loves and cherishes. She and her son Noah have a special relationship. Although no one knows about Noah's father, it does not affect their lives. Jennifer became stronger after Noah was diagnosed with autism. She has become a strong support and best friend to her son. The relationship between Jennifer and Noah is known and admired by everyone. They spend a lot of time together, share happy moments and support each other when needed. The small town also loved the family for their cheerfulness and kindness. However, no one could have predicted Jennifer's disappearance. On January 3, 2023, she disappeared without a trace. The next morning, the Limerick Township Police Department received a missing person call from Antonio Blair Watts Richardson, a close friend of Jennifer's. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard her voice, his anxiety was growing. Blair Watts had been trying to contact Jennifer for hours without success. All his attempts went unanswered. This behavior was completely unlike her, as she was a responsible person who always answered calls or messages, especially when it came to matters related to her son Noah. However, on this day, the boy's mother did not come to pick him up after school. This made Jennifer's family and friends very worried, as they knew her to be a caring mother who always cared about her children. This sudden disappearance made everyone feel uneasy. Blair Watts' call to the police was the beginning of a long and mysterious investigation that would later affect the entire city and cause a great tragedy. After Blair Watts reported his girlfriend missing, a major search began. Police, family, and friends joined forces, hoping to find any clues that could shed light on Jennifer's disappearance. Many questions were raised, and the main one was what could have caused this caring mother to abandon her son without any explanation. At 4 p.m. that afternoon, Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department arrived at Jennifer's family home to investigate the situation. Upon arrival, Officer Stephen found Jennifer's car still parked on the front porch. Upon entering the home, he discovered that her keys, wallet, and tablet were still inside the home. However, Jennifer's cell phone was nowhere to be found. During further investigation, police discovered that Jennifer's phone had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and had not been located since. The phone's last recorded location was near Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick Township. This discovery was a serious sign in the investigation, suggesting that something terrible might have happened to Jennifer. Young Jennifer Brown is missing and the police have begun an investigation. Investigators have questioned her family, friends, and neighbors, hoping to find information about her disappearance. However, no one has been able to provide useful information. Aunt Diane Bram and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Blair Watts are convinced that Jennifer would never have left alone. The reason is that she could not leave her son. She was a loving and devoted mother. All efforts by authorities and volunteers have been fruitless. They have not found any trace or clues to Jennifer's whereabouts. Her loved ones have appealed to the public through the media for information about her disappearance. A reward has been offered, but to no avail. Jennifer Brown's disappearance has left both investigators and her family with many questions and concerns. The police investigation has begun to examine every detail of the day she went missing. Blair Watts, the last close friend to see Jennifer alive, has come forward to share her story. On a typical January afternoon, Jennifer and Blair Watts chatted intimately in the warm living room about life, future plans, and their children. The two families' children often played together, and Jennifer asked Blair to pick up Noah from school so they could enjoy the evening together. This was normal for them because they were close friends. However, the next day, when Blair Watts went to pick up Noah from school, things took a strange turn. Noah was behaving erratically and the teachers were worried. They discovered that Noah had missed 2 important doses of medication to help control his illness. Jennifer was a very caring and nurturing mother. So when she did not contact the school about Noah's situation, everyone was surprised. School officials searched for information about Jennifer and discovered that she had left home to go to the grocery store but did not return as scheduled. This was very unlike Jennifer, who was always worried and concerned about her children. This incident made everyone even more worried. Jennifer's friend, Blair Watts, tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. When she did not receive a response, Blair Watts decided to check if Jennifer had picked up her son at the bus stop. However, when Jennifer did not appear, Blair Watts became concerned and decided to report the incident to the police. After the report, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. Hopes of her return faded. It seemed that Jennifer had disappeared without a trace. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after the disappearance was reported, 2 employees working in a warehouse near Roseford discovered a newly dug hole. When they investigated, they discovered the body of a woman buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who went to the burial site. After an autopsy, the police identified the young woman as Jennifer Brown. The sheriff contacted her family and informed them that Jennifer's body had been discovered near a warehouse in Roseford. Jennifer's autopsy revealed that she had died from abuse and asphyxiation. She also had 3 broken ribs, indicating that she had struggled with her attacker before she died. This evidence changed the nature of the investigation, and the missing person case was upgraded to a homicide case. The police began questioning people close to Jennifer, including her family and friends. However, these interviews did not yield any new information, and the police have yet to find a suspect. The investigation seemed to be at a standstill as no new evidence emerged. But surprisingly, the police received important information from Noah's former teacher. After Jennifer was reported missing, the police asked anyone with information to contact them. This call caught the attention of a former teacher of Noah, who decided to come forward to the police. A teacher recalled Jennifer's case, which initially seemed trivial but raised suspicions after the verdict. The teacher said Noah shared with her a key piece of information regarding the incident that occurred on January 4th, the day Jennifer went missing. Noah told her that when Blair Watts picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mother's personal cell phone in Blair Watts' pocket. He immediately recognized the phone because a childhood photo of himself was displayed on the lock screen. This became the key to the investigation into Jennifer's murder. The police had previously assumed that the killer had taken Jennifer's cell phone, but Blair Watts now became the prime suspect. As they delved deeper into the relationship between Jennifer and Blair Watts, hidden secrets began to emerge. This surprised the investigators. On the surface, the relationship between the two seems very close and understanding, and their families also interact frequently. However, when looking closely at the business transactions, the seemingly simple initial relationship turns out to be hidden under a layer of long-standing hatred. In fact, this friendship is closely tied to their business, and that creates unpredictable conflicts. What's more special, people have discovered disputes stemming from that relationship. For example, the breakdown of the business left Blair Watts with emotional conflicts that were difficult to overcome when the Bird's Kitchen store itself was closed in January 2022. After approaching Jennifer, in August 2022, Blair Watts received an offer of help. Jennifer decided to invest in his business to help revive Bird's Kitchen at a new location. Under the agreement, Jennifer would provide financial support to the restaurant every 6 weeks or so. Between August and January, Jennifer transferred $36,000 to Blair Watts to rebuild the business. She also agreed to provide an additional $99,000. However, Blair used the money for her own personal needs instead of investing in the restaurant. When the property owner discovered that Blair Watts had not met her financial obligations, they terminated the lease on December 26, 2022. This left Blair Watts in a desperate situation, losing money and the opportunity to reopen the restaurant. In desperation, Blair decided to commit a serious crime to save her business. During the investigation of Jennifer's case, investigators scrutinized the financial transaction history on her iPad. They discovered 2 illegal transfers of $177,000 to Bertie's Kitchen on January 3rd. These payments were not mentioned in the official agreement between Jennifer and Blair Watts. It is worth noting that these transfers initially failed because Jennifer's iPad had two-factor authentication enabled. However, after disabling the authentication system, the transfers were successful. This led investigators to suspect that Jennifer's boyfriend, Blair Watts, may have been involved in the murder. Investigators interviewed the property owners Blair Watts had rented. They discovered that on January 4th, the same day Blair Watts reported Jennifer missing, he came to them to sign the lease, claiming he had the money. Police then conducted an interview with Blair Watts' wife, Tiara Taylor, to determine where Blair Watts had been on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara said Blair Watts had visited Jennifer's family on January 3rd and did not return home until early the next morning. He returned home briefly, then left around 5 p.m. and did not return home until late in the evening. Further investigation revealed that Blair Watts had stayed at the home of his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and did not see anyone else until around 8 p.m. This meant that between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., Blair Watts had no evidence to suggest that he was not at the scene of the crime. Based on the available evidence, detectives developed a scenario for the murder. According to this scenario, on January 3rd, Blair Watts went to Jennifer's house around 1 p.m. while Noah was at school and likely killed her. After committing the crime, Blair Watts transferred money from Jennifer's iPad to his account. He then picked up Noah at the bus stop around 4 p.m. When he returned to Jennifer's house, he dropped Noah off and returned to the crime scene to dispose of the body. He took the body to a field near Roseford and buried it in a shallow grave. Blair Watts then went to Tatiana's house and stayed there overnight. However, he made a serious mistake. He let Noah see his mother's cell phone. This was important evidence that helped the police quickly find the killer. Law enforcement had enough evidence to convict, but they decided to investigate further to gather more information. To investigate further, the police requested the participation of film experts and a specially trained dog that could detect the scent of a corpse. First, the dog was brought to Jennifer's house to memorize the woman's scent. The police then led the dog to Blair Watts' car and it immediately detected a foul odor. This was the final key piece of evidence that solidified detectives' belief that Blair Watts was involved in the murder. On February 8, after months of investigation, Blair Watts was arrested and charged with aggravated murder, and burglary. He is currently being held in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing. When Jennifer's friends and family found out she was dead, they were shocked and heartbroken. But what made them even more heartbroken was that the killer was someone they knew and trusted. Now that Blair Watts has been arrested and brought to trial, they can finally rest easy knowing that justice has been served. Tiffany Barron, a friend of Jennifer's, spoke on behalf of the family. In an interview, she expressed her feelings. She still dreams about Jennifer. Jennifer's son, Noah, keeps asking about his mother and she doesn't know how to answer. If Blair Watts is convicted after the investigation and trial, he will spend the rest of his life in prison. The case was solved thanks to the keen observation of Jennifer's 8-year-old son. He discovered Blair Watts' mistake, helped solve the case and punish the culprit. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Foster family. Christopher Foster had always been considered a success. His mother, Enid, described him as someone who actively pursued financial opportunities from an early age. Along with his younger brother, Andrew, he aspired to follow in the footsteps of their late father, who had been a sales manager. Although they both aimed to become successful businessmen, Chris and Andrew had had a tense relationship since they were children. Andrew later explained that Chris's confidence and assertiveness had overshadowed Andrew's quiet nature. Despite this, both brothers were very close to their mother, Enid. In 1987, Chris married Jill, a housewife, and they had their daughter Kirsty in 1993. Chris's path to wealth began in the late 80s when he worked as a mattress salesman and used inexpensive pizza boxes for insulation. His life changed dramatically after he founded a successful engineering company. This business made Chris a self-made millionaire through the development of an innovative insulation material that became essential in the oil industry. The Piper Alpha oil rig explosion on July 6, 1988, had led to a catastrophic fire that lasted for days and claimed the lives of 167 people. After watching the news, Chris saw an opportunity in this tragedy and identified a market niche for fireproof insulation specifically for oil and gas rigs. Although many oil companies showed interest, they wanted certification of the product's effectiveness before signing a contract. To prove its value, Chris took the financial risk of mortgaging his house to fund an experiment. The test was successful. His product, OverShield, showed exceptional resilience compared to other insulation materials when exposed to fire. It even received a rare A1 fire test rating. Major oil companies quickly placed orders, making Christopher Foster a millionaire almost overnight. Reports suggested that he earned so much money that he didn't know how to spend it all. As his business grew, Christopher's annual turnover increased significantly from £50,000 to £1 million. By 2004, Chris's net worth had been reported to be £10 million. That same year, his wife Jill noticed a house in Shropshire Life magazine. It was Usbaston House, a beautiful mansion in Maesbrook, a wealthy village in Shropshire, England. The estate was 16 acres in size, had its own lake and equestrian grounds. Despite being offered at around £1.5 million, the house still needed repairs. Jill was so intrigued that Chris made an offer the next morning. Foster's family quickly sold their house and moved to Usbaston House. Chris then invested a further £50,000 to install a swimming pool and landscape the property. After settling down, Chris led a lavish lifestyle. He bought 2 Porsches, one for himself and one for Jill, a James Bond-style Aston Martin, Range Rovers, and many other vehicles. Their daughter Kirsty attended a private boarding school and Chris also bought her several horses. Kirsty spent time with her horses when not at school and participated in equestrian competitions. Friends described her as quiet, thoughtful, and kind. In addition, Chris also bought 4 dogs and several pigeons. He further enhanced their lives by hiring a butler and a personal assistant, and the house had antique furniture worth more than £200,000. Chris's most expensive hobby was his passion for shooting, demonstrated by his expensive gun collection, each costing between £12,000 and £12,500, equivalent to nearly $20,000 at the time. Chris often attended shooting parties that could last 3 days, with bills running up to £8,000. He had a habit of leaving guns around the house. Occasionally, when pigeons made a mess of Chris's car, he would shoot them, much to Jill's frustration. In one disturbing incident, when Kirsty's black Labrador began disturbing the sheep, Chris was unable to control the dog and led it down a country road to shoot it in the head. Chris was a successful businessman but lacked a long-term vision. Notoriously impulsive, he craved instant gratification and was quick to cut ties with people who annoyed him. Chris enjoyed being admired and envied by others for his wealth, and social status was very important to him. Over time, both Chris and Jill moved up the social ladder, and it became clear to those close to Chris that he wanted to move away from his roots in Wolverhampton. Jill enjoyed shopping sprees and spent her days doing self-care activities like nail and hair appointments, along with beauty treatments like manicures and Botox injections. Chris and his family regularly went on luxury vacations, staying in luxury hotels and enjoying the best food. These lavish trips could sometimes cost up to £20,000 each, and Chris didn't hesitate to pay. However, unbeknownst to his friends and family, Chris had reached his financial limit and began withdrawing money from his business. His excessive spending had led to financial imbalance, with more money going out than coming in. In 2003, Chris had signed an exclusive contract with DRC, giving them the exclusive rights to produce his oil rig sealant. By 2004, his net worth had been reported to be £1 million. However, by 2005, he owed £2.8 million. Instead of cutting costs, Chris, due to his lavish spending habits, sought more money from other sources. Despite the exclusive agreement with DRC, he signed another contract with another company to sell his products. DRC discovered this infringement and sued Chris, resulting in a lawsuit and DRC acquiring Chris's patent. Chris went bankrupt, and in 2007, his company was dissolved. His assets worth £3 million were frozen and his salary was gone. Despite serious financial troubles, Chris continued to act as if nothing significant had happened. At the same time, Chris became involved in a dispute with his accountant, who reported him to the Inland Revenue for tax evasion. Chris had failed to pay VAT, national insurance, and various other taxes. To deal with his increasing tax obligations, he had to borrow from banks to ease his financial strain. In addition, he had mortgaged the Usbaston house 3 times and withdrawn money from more than 20 different bank accounts. Despite his lavish lifestyle and constant spending, Chris still tried to hide the fact that he was deeply in debt. Chris gradually found himself struggling with overwhelming challenges, aware that time was ticking away and fearful of losing everything. However, during a conversation with a friend about houses, Chris insisted that he would never sell Usbaston house. Struggling with the pressure to maintain his flashy and knowing that his time and money were running out, Chris repeatedly sought professional help. He confided in the doctor, revealing his feelings of depression and suicidal thoughts. He started taking antidepressants. In August 2008, Chris came across a letter from his house managers posted on the front gate. The letter reported that they planned to return the following Tuesday to reclaim the house and other assets. The housekeeper said that when she showed Chris the letter, Chris appeared confused but remained silent. The nightmare that Chris had been avoiding had now become a harsh reality. He was on the brink of losing all his material possessions. The thought of Kirsty and Jill losing their familiar lifestyle was unbearable for Christopher. His family faced the possibility of returning to Wolverhampton, saying goodbye to their lavish lifestyle. For a proud man like Chris, such a situation would have been extremely humiliating. On August 21, 2008, a friend contacted Chris via text message to ask about his health, and he replied, "Not good, things are about to happen to me." On August 25, 2008, the Foster's family received an invitation to a barbecue and clay pigeon shooting event. They then joined the gathering. None of the attendees noticed any signs of difficulty in the Fosters. Witnesses recalled that Chris appeared happy. Their family still exuded happiness without knowing what Chris had planned that night. Chris informed Jill that he wanted to leave the gathering. Although Jill wanted to stay a little longer, they eventually left around 8:30 p.m., arriving home just a few minutes later at 8:44 p.m., their route captured by home security footage. Soon after, Jill went to bed. At 11:30 p.m., Chris went upstairs to check on Kirsty, urging her to go to bed while continuing to text a friend online. Around midnight, Chris decided to turn off the internet, causing Kirsty to end her conversation with her friend and go to bed. At 3 a.m., Chris began his violent rampage. He entered Jill's room and used a silencer to shoot her in the head while she was sleeping. Next, he went to Kirsty's room and killed her in the same way. Home security cameras recorded Chris's actions as he carried a shotgun outside the dog cage, killing each dog with a shot to the head. He then went to the stables and killed the horses before burning the stables with the animals inside. Chris appeared expressionless in the video. To prevent firefighters from reaching the house, Chris blocked the main entrance, shooting at the tires to make movement more difficult. He also pumped 200 liters of oil from the family's tank into the house's basement through connecting pipes. It is clear that Chris took deliberate steps to completely destroy the Osbaston house. His actions appeared to have been motivated by a desire to prevent others from acquiring property that he could not keep. Chris burned down his house and covered his car and belongings in oil. The fire quickly spread and destroyed everything. Chris, still carrying a rifle, went back into the house and lay down next to Jill's body in the bedroom, holding her as flames engulfed them. At 4:11 a.m., the security cameras stopped working. A neighbor saw the growing fire and called for help. Firefighters quickly arrived. The fire was too intense and difficult to control. As firefighters tried to put out the fire, neighbors watched the building burn, worried for those inside. In the following days, the media called in to search for Foster's family, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Because of Chris's wealth, the authorities opened an investigation, initially suspecting that the Foster family had been kidnapped. However, at the time, neither the bodies nor the security footage were found, so many speculated about what might have happened to them. It took 3 days for the fire to be completely extinguished. After the fire was extinguished, investigators carefully examined the house and found the bodies of Jill and Christopher on beds in a room that had collapsed into the living room. However, there was no sign of Kirsty. While some hoped she could have escaped, others feared she had been kidnapped. Sadly, Kirsty's remains were found in the rubble a few days later. Investigators used a brush to carefully collect her remains into a hearse. A fragment of Kirsty's skull revealed that she had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, like her mother. After examining the body, the police began to suspect that Chris had committed a crime. At the same time, they began investigating his financial situation. When they dug deeper, they discovered that Chris, a seemingly successful businessman, was actually heavily in debt. His total debt had reached £4 million, and when creditors tried to take his assets, they discovered that Chris had intended to demolish the house to ensure that there was nothing left for them to take. Security footage confirmed the police's suspicions. Chris committed the murders and took his own life without leaving any explanation or warning. Speculation about the motives behind the brutal crime led to 2 main theories. One theory had suggested that Chris, feeling ashamed of having lost his fortune, chose to commit the heinous act to avoid admitting his failures. Another theory had proposed that Chris, being self-centered, decided to destroy everything rather than face the possibility of loss. However, Enid had disagreed with these theories. She had firmly believed that Chris acted out of love for his family, trying to protect them from financial ruin. She had defended him and felt a deep sense of sympathy for his situation. In contrast, Chris's brother Andrew had held a very different view. Despite not speaking for 16 years, Andrew had briefly considered reconciling with Chris for their mother's sake. However, his fear of a hostile encounter had kept him from reaching out. Andrew had alleged that Chris had bullied and sexually assaulted him during their childhood, leading to a tumultuous relationship. Andrew had maintained that Chris exhibited bullying and controlling behavior. Andrew's attempts to reconcile with Chris in 1999 had been met with resistance. Chris had responded to Andrew's letter with a demand for a written apology, stating that Andrew would have to beg and scrape on bended knee to make amends. Andrew had believed that Chris refused to acknowledge his past wrongdoings and instead held on to long-standing grudges. For months after the tragedy, on December 19, 2008, a joint funeral had been held for 15-year-old Kirsty and 49-year-old Jill at their local village church. The service had been quiet and respectful, attended by close friends and family. Both Kirsty and Jill had been buried in the same plot, as requested by Jill's family. Chris had received a private funeral and was buried elsewhere. In the years following the tragedy, the remains of the burnt-out house and the family's charred belongings had been left on the site. These had included Kirsty's first aid book for her horses and a handwritten note detailing the family's meal plans for the week of the tragedy. The ruins of the house had remained until 2011 when the debris had been cleared. The 16-acre estate had been sold in 2014, with plans to build a new 6-bedroom house. Although the property had been put up for sale in 2012, it had taken 2 years to sell, reportedly after the price had been reduced. The reasons behind Christopher Foster's actions may have been financial struggles and the pressure to maintain a wealthy image. However, this had not justified the horrific outcome. Instead of having made sensible financial decisions or confiding in his loved ones, Chris had chosen a destructive path that had had devastating consequences for everyone involved. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She has spent most of her life in Michigan. Lauren pursued her passions as a model and actress, attending workshops and interacting with photographers to further her career. Those who know her describe her as charming and easygoing. Lauren is passionate about her acting and modeling work. She enjoys new experiences, learning from others and sharing ideas, seeing life as an adventure and striving to live life to the fullest. Lauren is married to Daniel Stewart, a senior software architect at the University of Michigan, where he works predicting heart attacks. Prior to his current role, Daniel spent several years in the tech industry as a Coda developer. Lauren and Daniel were devout Christians in the Jehovah's Witnesses sect for a long time until 2013, when they decided to leave Christianity. Lauren and Daniel have 2 children, Stephen Stewart, 27, a data solutions architect and computer scientist, and Bethany Stewart, 24, a talented artist and graphic designer. At 45, Lauren seems to have the perfect life, a loving husband, well-educated children, a thriving modeling career, and a beautiful home in Keio Harbor. But deep inside, Lauren struggled with the emotional pain of being shunned and rejected by the Jehovah's Witness community she grew up in. The strict rules and practices of shunning former members took their toll on her. Lauren and Daniel's decision to leave the faith was a difficult one. The Laurens remained devout Jehovah's Witnesses until 2013, but the church's strict rules posed problems for their children's futures. Celebrating holidays was forbidden and higher education was prohibited, with the threat of expulsion for non-compliance. When Daniel asked for his children to attend university, he was warned that defying church policy would result in expulsion, which was distressing for the family as it meant complete social isolation, even from relatives. Lauren's family made the decision to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses after careful consideration. While the decision initially seemed right, they soon faced strong opposition from their community, which became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She found that even simple tasks like going shopping became difficult due to hostile looks and hurtful comments from former friends. Although these comments were not directed at her, they were said loudly enough for her to hear. Living in a small community of 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, Lauren's family faced a harsh reality, with prominent church members constantly reminding Lauren of her outcast status. The emotional stress eventually became too much to bear. Lauren turned to exercise to regain her health. She worked out regularly and made it her routine, which led to a dramatic change. Lauren became a fitness trainer and found success as a model. Despite being rejected by the church, Lauren appeared optimistic and confident to those around her. However, behind her pleasant exterior, Lauren was secretly struggling with chronic depression. She had been battling this condition for some time, and it had gotten worse since being ostracized by the church. As a result, Lauren often hid her true feelings behind a fake smile. Lauren's family was drowning in debt, on the brink of bankruptcy. Overwhelmed by the pressure of her own financial difficulties and emotional pain, Lauren devised a plan to solve all her problems at once. She began researching ways to end her life and videos on how to use a pistol. On February 15, 2018, Lauren left a heartbreaking note on the dining room table, meticulously cleaned the house, and sent messages to loved ones and Daniel's boss. And finally, Lauren flipped through all the family photos on her desk. Lauren texted her husband's boss at 9:24 a.m. saying that her husband Daniel had died in an accident and that she would provide more information later. However, she did not respond to her boss's subsequent messages. At 5:07 p.m. that same day, Lauren texted her cousin, saying that she was taking her family with her so they wouldn't have to suffer. She said that they would sleep until Christ was resurrected and hoped that her cousin would do better than her. Her cousin was frightened by the message and told Lauren not to harm herself or her family. Lauren had been suffering from mental health issues in recent months that her family had not known about. She had a gun and made the tragic decision to use it to kill her loved ones. Lauren's first victim was her husband, Daniel, 47, who was shot in the head while trying to escape from the basement where he was relaxing. Lauren used a pillow as a silencer to muffle the sound of the gunshot. After Daniel was shot, Lauren went upstairs to her daughter Bethany's sleeping room. Lauren shot her at point-blank range, instantly killing Bethany. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own house on the other side of town, Lauren tricked Stephen into coming to her house. When Stephen was busy with the task his mother had assigned him, his back turned, Lauren shot him at close range. The horror did not stop there. Lauren killed the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor heard these gunshots but thought someone was slamming the door. When the house became a cold morgue, Lauren meticulously cleaned it. Then Lauren used the gun to kill herself. Lauren's cousin, who had been trying to contact her, became concerned when she did not respond to their messages. The cousin decided to visit Lauren's home the following morning, February 16th, with a friend. When no one answered the door, they contacted the police. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the kitchen to be tidy and well organized, with a stocked refrigerator and handwritten labels on various items. A calendar was also hanging on the refrigerator. However, police discovered the family dog dead in the bathtub. This made police more cautious, initially fearing the possibility of an active shooter. As they continued to search the house, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, shot while sitting on a chair in another room. In a bedroom, the police discovered Bethany's lifeless body, shot while she was asleep. A pillow had been used to muffle the sound of the gunshot, and the pillowcase showed signs of the shooting. The police also found Daniel Stewart's body on the basement floor in front of a couch, with his right hand still in his jeans pocket. Elsewhere in the house, Lauren was found at the foot of the stairs, with a pistol next to her and a gunshot wound between her eyes. 2 notes were discovered on the dining room table, one addressed to the medical examiner, the other a suicide note revealing Lauren's inner struggles. Lauren's note explained that she felt she had allowed evil into her heart by rejecting God's love. She believed that by killing her family, she could spare them from suffering. Through interviews with relatives, friends, and neighbors, it became clear that the couple had become reclusive after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's past struggles, particularly her battle with depression, were compounded by the stress of motherhood. Family members also revealed that Lauren, who was one of 11 siblings, had a history of depression that likely contributed to her actions. Lauren has become increasingly obsessed with her faith in recent years. Her family, including her father and sister, have not spoken to her in years. Lauren's mother died when she was 13. The tragic event has left a lasting impact on those close to the family. Joyce Taylor, a longtime friend, believes the murders were a direct result of the family's rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Joyce Taylor and other former members reveal the harsh reality of leaving the faith. When someone leaves the Jehovah's Witnesses, they are often shunned by their own family members who remain in the church. This severe form of shunning can take a heavy emotional toll. According to Joyce Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to give their children a college education conflicted with the church's teachings, which discourage such pursuits. This clash between their aspirations and the church's rigid doctrines ultimately led to a tragic outcome. The family was shunned in every way possible. As Joyce Taylor explained, when you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, the church controls many aspects of your life, including your friendships and associations. If you go against these rules, you risk being disfellowshipped or shunned. Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the opportunity to confront the congregation about a recent tragedy. She passionately criticized the gathering, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. 5 years ago, you withdrew your support from a small family, Joyce Taylor exclaimed. They had no one else to turn to, but you turned them away and shunned them. Why? Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit. Just 2 days ago, 4 people died because of your alienation, Joyce Taylor said. Her words sent shockwaves through the room, forcing her to push away members of her congregation as she expressed her pent-up frustration. Police investigations into Lauren's family revealed that she, her husband, and her sons were all using cannabis. Further investigation revealed that Lauren's horrific actions were the result of a combination of factors. These included feelings of loneliness, strained relationships with family and friends due to their differing religious views. These factors combined to add to her pain, ultimately leading her to commit a horrific act. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mike Williams. Mike Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money and Mike, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future. Instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. Mike enrolled in North Florida Christian High School, where he excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise had introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike and Denise attended Florida State University, where they both majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant, and Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working individual, consistently putting in 15-hour days, which led to rapid success in his career. In 1994, he married Denise, and around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The four of them maintained a close and supportive relationship. Mike loved his wife deeply and was determined to provide for their family to the best of his ability. He had boundless energy and was a high achiever. By the age of 31, Mike Williams had achieved significant success as a real estate appraiser, earning a substantial annual income of nearly $200,000. This allowed the couple to purchase a comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999, they welcomed a daughter into their family. Although Mike was prudent, he had a tendency to engage in risky activities. which prompted his friends to warn Denise about them. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike sought the advice of his trusted friend Brian, who worked as an insurance agent. Brian sold Mike 2 life insurance policies, one worth $250,000 and another worth $500, providing financial protection for his loved ones in the event of an unforeseen disaster. In 2000, Mike's father died, which had a profound impact on Mike. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike turned to his friend Brian for help. Brian assisted Mike in getting a $1 million life insurance policy, adding to an existing policy and bringing the total coverage to nearly $2 million, just 6 months before Mike vanished. On December 16, 2000, their 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. Denise and their daughter stayed at home, expecting Mike to return that day so they could celebrate their anniversary with a planned night out in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. However, Mike didn't come back, prompting Denise to become worried and call her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father drove to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but Mike was missing. The search for Mike began, and after a few hours, a helicopter pilot located the boat drifting approximately 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Notably, Mike's shotgun was still in its case on board, indicating that he was never able to use it. This discovery led to a shift in the operation from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. Locals familiar with the area informed the search team that the location was previously an orchard, known as Stump Field, due to the numerous stumps both above and below the water level, which made navigating motorized boats through the area hazardous. The search team formulated a theory about what might have happened to Mike. He might have collided with a stump while operating his boat, fallen into the water, and become trapped, with his boots filling with water and ultimately causing him to drown. Several agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, participated in the search for Mike. Although they made an extensive and systematic effort, they did not find any signs of him. After a week, the search operation shifted its focus to a body recovery effort. Search teams used probe poles to scan the lake bottom and brought in dogs to assist. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat, but it could not be confirmed as belonging to Mike. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency suggested that Mike might have been attacked by alligators, which could explain why his body was never found, given the lake's known alligator population. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did not find any evidence of a violent death and supported this theory. The search was finally called off after 5 weeks. The day after the authorities gave up searching for Mike, Denise put together a memorial service to pay tribute to him. While it appeared to everyone that Denise had come to terms with losing her husband, Mike's mother was still grappling with the loss. 6 months down the line, in June 2001, a fisherman stumbled upon a sinister find: a pair of boots bobbing on the lake's surface. This prompted a team of divers to scour the lake, and they fished out a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the depths. When they examined the jacket, they found a hunting license with Mike Williams' name and signature tucked away in one of its pockets. The discovery of the hunting jacket and boots raised many questions about Mike Williams' disappearance. The fact that neither item showed signs of an alligator attack and appeared to have been recently placed in the water rather than having been there for 6 months was suspicious. The boots, for example, were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. Despite these inconsistencies, a week later, Denise's attorney requested that the court declare Mike Williams dead, citing the discovery of his belongings as evidence. The attorney suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had likely consumed his body whole. The court granted the motion, and the death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. However, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to accept this conclusion and continued to search for her son. Her efforts caused tension with her former sister-in-law, Denise, who demanded that she stop searching and accept reality. Cheryl's persistence eventually led to a strained relationship between the two women, and Denise followed through on her threat. Undeterred, Cheryl spent the next 3 years fighting to have Mike's disappearance investigated. She made numerous phone calls, posted signs, wrote to the governor, compiled a book of evidence, and contacted reporters. Her persistence finally paid off when she convinced an alligator expert, Matthew Oresco, to get involved. Oresco explained that alligators don't feed during the cold winter months, and that there would always be forensic evidence left behind after an alligator kill. After 3 years, Cheryl Williams finally persuaded law enforcement to abandon the alligator attack theory and launch an official investigation into her son Mike's disappearance. The case was reopened based on newly uncovered facts about alligators' eating habits and evidence gathered from interviews and official data. Former investigator Ronnie Austin revealed that the general consensus among law enforcement agencies was that Mike's death was not accidental. Initially, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency took charge of the case, as Mike was considered a missing hunter. They spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for his body, but neglected to explore other possibilities. Subsequent investigations involved interviewing all those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene. He pointed out several suspicious circumstances. Mike rarely hunted alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area, and the severe storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, yet it was found on the west shore. Furthermore, the boat's motor was not running, despite being full of gasoline. If Mike had fallen out of the boat while driving, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas. Unfortunately, law enforcement realized too late that they were not dealing with a simple drowning. By then, the crime scene had already been compromised by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have been a vital clue was taken by the family without proper verification, and potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester aroused the suspicion of investigators due to their sudden union. The fact that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise raised eyebrows. Further investigation revealed that Denise had received a substantial financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives discovered that Winchester was the one who had sold the policy to Mike. It was also peculiar that Denise, as Mike's wife, showed little interest in the investigation and actively tried to hinder Cheryl's efforts, even going so far as to forbid the grandmother from communicating with her granddaughter. When the newlywed couple was brought in for questioning, their statements failed to shed new light on the case. Brian provided an alibi, stating that he was 60 miles from the lake and at home in bed at the time of Mike's disappearance, which his ex-wife Kathy could corroborate. He claimed that he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that Mike's disappearance was not accidental, and they suspect he was a victim of a crime. However, due to the lack of sufficient evidence, they are unable to bring charges. Despite this, Cheryl Williams persisted, and her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel featuring a story on Mike's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. By that time, Cheryl had become disenchanted with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, convinced that they were either incapable or uninterested in resolving the case. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother, Cheryl, began a campaign to push for a new investigator or special prosecutor in Mike's case. Over 9 years, she wrote a staggering 2,600 letters to Governor Rick Scott, pleading her case. Meanwhile, in 2012, Denise discovered that Brian was cheating on her, and they broke up. The following year, she filed for divorce. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, an appraisal of their former family home was scheduled, which would finally free them from their property disputes. This event marked a turning point in Mike's case. The breakup was acrimonious, with Brian refusing to accept the divorce and Denise refusing to continue the relationship. Their constant fighting was further complicated by the Williams investigation, which seemed to be mocking them. Brian continued to call Denise, but she stopped taking his calls. The stress was taking a toll on him. On August 5, 2016, the day of the scheduled real estate appraisal, Denise left her home to drive to her job at Florida State University. As she chatted with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her car. To her shock, it was Winchester. Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and ordered her to drive straight ahead. He claimed he was forced to take this drastic measure because she had stopped answering his calls. Denise attempted to placate Brian by agreeing with everything he said and promising to give him a chance to salvage their marriage. Naively, Brian believed her. Denise reassured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the car, taking with him the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools. It became evident that Denise had narrowly escaped death. Denise promptly called emergency services, and Brian was swiftly arrested and charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court ruled to detain Brian without bail. Cheryl Williams, hopeful that this development would shed light on her son's disappearance case, expressed optimism. Denise told the New York Daily News that she thought Brian was motivated by their wealth and prayed that he would reveal the truth. In a surprising turn of events, Brian cooperated, negotiating a lenient deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. Brian began his confession by saying that initially, their marriage was going well, but he was a bad husband. He discovered a note in his first wife Kathy's purse, revealing her infidelity, and he sought revenge. They regularly socialized with Denise and Mike, going to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but it wasn't until his girlfriend Kathy cheated on him that he started viewing Denise in a romantic light. The affair between Brian and Denise started in October 1997. What began as a drunken one-night stand at a rock concert soon turned into frequent secret trysts. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever possible. Brian didn't want to divorce Kathy, but Denise made it clear she wouldn't leave her husband. She cared deeply about public opinion and didn't want to risk losing custody of her daughter. Over time, their affair evolved beyond casual sex. Denise and Brian saw themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became apparent they couldn't continue like this. They couldn't bear to be apart. But divorce was off the table for Denise. Her reputation as a pious person had to remain intact. Then, Mike nearly died in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. Denise saw an opportunity to escape her predicament. After making a deal with the prosecutor, Brian will disclose that the year 2000 sparked discussions about Mike and Kathy's death. According to Brian, Denise had wanted to deflect responsibility, placing the blame solely on him and not herself. She had preferred a scenario in which their deaths would be viewed as an accident rather than a murder, thereby allowing her to convince herself that their fate was in God's hands, which would enable her to live with the consequences. After considering various options, Brian and Denise chose to stage a boating accident. They planned the murder to coincide with the maximum payout on Mike's life insurance policy, which was set to expire at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip, claiming he'd found an ideal spot on Lake Semol's shores. Mike thought he'd be back home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Brian told him to bring his wading boots, as they were essential for the trip. Unbeknownst to Mike, Brian had a sinister motive. If he fell overboard wearing wading boots, he'd supposedly drown quickly. The plan was to make Mike's death appear as an accidental drowning. Once they were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat. However, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and started wading through the water towards the shore. Brian panicked, not knowing how to react. Mike began shouting for help, and Brian, desperate and confused, grabbed a shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking of the consequences. Brian's plan had unraveled, and he had to cover his tracks. Time was running out. He should have been home by now, getting ready to go hunting with his father-in-law. Since no one knew he was at the lake with Mike, Brian decided to drive home and pretend he'd overslept. He hoped Kathy would still be asleep. Brian entered the house as quietly as possible. Kathy was asleep, and his phone was on the floor. He went to bed, then called his father-in-law to apologize. Next, Brian created an alibi for himself before hiding the body. Denise was unaware that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to confess, but Denise didn't want to hear it. For her, it was enough that her husband was gone. She preferred to believe that God had prevented Mike from swimming out and let him drown, as Brian had suggested. They promised each other to keep the secret. Denise and Brian rationalized the killing, claiming that Mike's presence made it impossible for them to live together. They downplayed the role of money, saying it was just an added bonus. Brian testified in court that investigators had discovered he had planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license as part of a ruse. His aim was twofold. First, to deter searchers from abandoning the lake, and later, to provide justification for declaring Mike dead, thereby allowing Denise to collect insurance benefits. Impressively, they managed to expedite the typically 5-year recognition process to just 7 months, securing not only Social Security benefits, but also other advantages. As a result, Denise received approximately $2 million on May 8, 2018. Denise Williams faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being an accessory to a felony, all of which carried a life sentence. Despite pleading not guilty to all 3 charges, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2019. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley inherited all of her late father's assets and the insurance money that had been owed to Denise. Denise Williams appealed her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence to implicate her in the actual murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, although the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is currently being held at the Florida Women's Reception Center and will be 78 years old upon her release. Brian Winchester is currently serving the remainder of his sentence at Madison Correctional Institute in Florida, with a scheduled release date of July 30th, 2036, at which point he will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, firmly believes her mother is innocent and attributes responsibility to Brian Winchester. While refusing to discuss the case or her personal life with the media, Ansley remains estranged from her uncle, Nick, and grandmother, Cheryl, who are distressed by their inability to connect with her. Cheryl deeply regrets having lost both her son and her granddaughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, but his family moved to Cedar City, Utah, when he was young, after his father finished dental school. Growing up, Michael was an active boy who enjoyed playing baseball, basketball, and soccer. He achieved the rank of Eagle Scout and performed well academically. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska during the summer, where he quickly rose to the position of line manager, overseeing more than a dozen men due to his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then served a mission trip to South Brazil as a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which further deepened his faith and strengthened his bond with his religious community. Upon returning to the United States, Michael pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, he met his future wife, Tasha Earle, and they fell in love, getting married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael seemed like the perfect family man to those who didn't know him. He was always involved in his kids' lives, coaching their sports teams, attending school concerts, and spending quality time with them, whether it was sledding or working on projects in the garage. But on January 4, 2023, the illusion he created around his family life shattered. That day, police found 8 dead bodies at the Haight residence, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned and confused. When Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work, their colleagues became worried and alerted the police to check on the family's welfare at their home in Enoch. The officers arrived at the Haight residence, but no one answered the door. As they walked around the property, it looked like nobody was home. Knowing the family had 5 kids, the police contacted the Iron County School District to see if any of the children were in school that day, but it turned out none of the kids were present when the police arrived at the Haight home. The officers searched the premises to make sure there was no immediate danger, and after a thorough search, confirmed that nobody needed medical attention, and there were no signs of an active threat. The detectives arrived at the crime scene shortly after it was declared. Upon entering the main bedroom, they saw 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach with his head turned to the left, one arm under his head on a pillow, and a blanket covering part of his body. His sister Tasha was similarly positioned with only part of her body covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, they found Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, just like her daughter and grandson. In Bry's room, the detectives found the 12-year-old girl lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Amon's room, they discovered the 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner of the room, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed with her head resting on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, her head resting on a pillow and her body covered by the blanket. The detectives discovered Michael Haight's body in the exercise room in the basement of his home, lying on top of a sleeping bag. All 8 victims, including his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children, were found dead with gunshot wounds. Given the circumstances, it didn't take long for the detectives to identify Michael Haight as the primary suspect. They believed he had killed his family members before taking his own life. A neighbor's testimony played a crucial role in helping the detectives reconstruct the timeline of the crime. The neighbor recalled waking up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom and hearing a loud bang, similar to fireworks, as she exited her room. However, she felt annoyed because it was past the permitted date for fireworks in the neighborhood. She then heard 2 more bangs in quick succession, followed by a short pause. This pattern continued, with brief pauses before each subsequent bang, except for a longer pause before the final one. Based on the neighbor's statement and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, detectives theorized that the loud noises she had heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events of that night. They suspected that Michael Hatch committed the brutal murders during this specific time frame. During the investigation into the Hatch family murders, detectives discovered that an unnamed person outside the family had reported abuse to the Utah Division of Child and Family Services in 2020. This individual claimed that 14-year-old Macy confided in them about her fear of her father, sparking a deeper investigation into the Hatch household. After receiving the DCFS report, Macy and her parents were questioned separately. During Macy's interview, the investigator uncovered disturbing information. Macy revealed that her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she feared he would kill her. She disclosed that the violent attacks began in 2017, including an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. When detectives questioned Michael Hatch, he claimed he had never physically harmed his daughter. He downplayed the incidents Macy described, saying they were simply misunderstandings. Michael attributed his emotional turmoil to two recent events: the death of his father and his brother's divorce. He stated that, in his distress, he took out his frustration on his older daughter, Tasha. Tasha chose not to pursue criminal charges against Michael. Similarly, the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office decided not to press charges, deeming the case insufficient to meet the prosecution requirements set by the statute. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which revealed that her relationship with Michael did not pose a significant threat to her life. Nevertheless, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months following the case's opening. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, detectives formed a different impression of Michael Hatch than the one he presented to the community. Tasha's friends revealed that whenever they visited, they would often chat with her, while the kitchen water was running to mask their conversation, as Tasha suspected Michael was spying on her discussions. They also helped Tasha with housework during their visits so Michael wouldn't have anything to criticize her about. Tasha's friends disclosed that whenever she texted them, she would respond with brief, upbeat messages, likely aware that Michael might read them. They believed she did this to maintain a positive facade for Michael's benefit, implying that everything was fine in their marriage. Detectives found Michael displayed controlling behavior towards his wife, Tasha. He took away her car keys and phone to keep her from leaving. They also suspected him after he overreacted to her buying a $30 rug from Walmart, accusing her of excessive spending despite the legitimate need. Tasha shared with her friends her concerns that her 7-year-old son, Amon, was increasingly mimicking his father Michael's bad behavior. Whenever she gave Amon an instruction, he would respond by saying that it was not his job. This worried Tasha because it revealed Amon's growing lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. She mentioned that Michael frequently disregarded or ignored her instructions, and Amon seemed to be following his example. In 2022, Tasha prioritized self-care by getting her nails done despite her busy schedule. However, her husband Michael wasn't supportive, imposing strict rules on her independence. After her appointment, Tasha felt confident and told Michael she'd make it a monthly routine, sparking his anger over the potential cost. To address Michael's concerns, Tasha explained calmly that her monthly self-care expenses came out to $25. Despite this, Michael remained skeptical, claiming that by spending money on her nails, Tasha was essentially taking away from their children's basic needs. This stance stemmed from his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. At the same time, Tasha began to prioritize her self-care and eventually started losing weight, a significant change after years of her husband calling her fat and ugly. Michael became angry about her weight loss, accusing Tasha of cheating on him as he struggled to explain the sudden change in her appearance. As Michael's controlling behavior escalated, he tried to manipulate Tasha regarding her weight loss. He begged her to stop, fearing that other men might find her attractive. Underlying this request were his deep-seated insecurities and desire for complete control over his wife's body and actions. Michael exhibited a frugal attitude during the holiday season, despite earning a significant income. He allocated only $100 for each of their 5 children to buy gifts, whereas Tasha made sure they had a fulfilling Christmas. However, Michael refused to provide additional funds for his wife and children, justifying his stance by claiming that he didn't see the need to give them more of what he believed was rightfully his. Michael controlled every aspect of Tasha's life, including her cleaning and childcare habits. He insisted on using baby wipes, claiming they were eco-friendly and cost-effective, but this caused Tasha stress and compromised her comfort and hygiene. If she didn't comply, Michael threatened trouble, leaving her fearful and submissive. According to Tasha's friends, she revealed to them that Michael was mean to her throughout their marriage, but he didn't mistreat their children until the late 2010s. However, as time passed, the abuse towards Macy worsened, causing her to contemplate suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for Macy, demanding she maintain straight A's despite her struggles. The pressure to meet his expectations became overwhelming for Macy, who was already dealing with the emotional weight of her father's abuse. Macy's friends shared another disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael came home and found Macy resting her head on her mother's lap. He became enraged and ordered Macy to get up and clean her room. This event left Macy deeply shaken, as she remembered gazing into her father's eyes and seeing hatred and evil staring back. Detectives found another instance where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael's warnings. Michael blamed his wife Tasha for their kids' misbehavior, calling them the worst in the world. He berated Tasha in front of their kids, even calling her fat and ugly. Tasha realized she needed to escape her 20-year marriage to Michael after a distressing incident exposed his abusive nature and temper. Seeing the harm it was causing their kids, she knew she had to leave. Tasha decided to divorce Michael after over 20 years, prioritizing their children's well-being over their marriage. On Dec 21, 2022, she initiated proceedings, but asked to delay serving papers until after the holiday season, wanting one last normal Christmas for their 5 kids before the separation. Michael got divorce papers at his office on Dec 27th. He called Tasha, acting normal, asking about her day, like nothing was wrong. He told her to leave the house, but wanted the kids to stay. Tasha refused, insisting on taking the kids with her. Tasha took the children to her mother's house in Lynn, Utah. That evening, Michael arrived at his mother-in-law's house and tried to persuade Tasha to go for a ride with him. But Tasha declined, telling her friends she had a bad feeling about going anywhere alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, her mom Gail moved in to help. However, Michael made things worse by moving into the basement fitness room instead of leaving the house. Tasha told her friends she had found a discrepancy in their children's savings accounts, which held $220,000. What she discovered shocked her. Michael had transferred the money out of the accounts without her knowledge or permission. After her father's death, Tasha inherited several firearms, including hunting rifles and a handgun. When she checked her house in January 2023, she realized all the guns were gone. Further investigation revealed Michael had taken the weapons, leaving Tasha and her family defenseless in case of an emergency. Macy, Michael and Tasha's eldest child, confided in her friends that she would welcome her parents' divorce. She longed for the peace that would come with her father's absence from the home. Macy even kept a secret phone in her room, which she used to record her father's erratic behavior, hoping to gather evidence to support the divorce. However, Tasha found the phone and hid it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, had a troubled home life due to the constant drama. To escape this, Briley would often visit her neighbor's house, where she found comfort with their grandchildren. Briley confided in a friend that she was relieved about her parents' upcoming divorce. She had even bought some new books, but was too afraid to tell her father, fearing he would become angry. Tasha met her lawyer on January 3, 2023, to discuss her divorce from abusive husband Michael. She felt relieved he'd moved to the basement due to his volatile behavior. Asked if she'd ever feared for her or her children's safety, Tasha said she never had. In hindsight, Tasha's optimism was tragically misplaced. The police investigation was harrowing, piecing together a chilling sequence of events. A disturbing Google search on December 30th stood out, revealing Michael's firearms queries just days before the deadly shooting, painting a chilling picture of his intentions. The search results revealed alarming questions, such as inquiries about how loud a 9mm gunshot is, what a gunshot sounds like, What to do if gunshots are heard near one's house? If a single gunshot in the neighborhood at night would be immediately recognized? And if one would be brave enough to call the police? How loud a gunshot in the house would be? And if a neighbor would hear a gunshot in the garage? And how loud a 40mm pistol is? Michael's suicide note said he'd rather rot in hell than endure his wife's controlling behavior. He felt desperate, frustrated, and trapped, repeatedly asking for help that never came. Determined to end the manipulation, he refused to be a burden to society. The case's details have shocked many, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated, carefully planned to catch his family off guard. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20th, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child to the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp, and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, eventually working as administrator for State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to back and leg pain. During this time, she started filing disability claims. On August 16, 2016, around noon, Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with mental and physical disabilities since a car crash in 2005, died after being shot 5 times by Pam Hupp in her apartment. Earlier that day, Pam called 911, reporting a robbery. According to Pam, Gumpenberger had jumped out of a vehicle driven by another person, attacked her with a knife while she was in her SUV, and she claimed she slapped the knife away with a karate chop. Pam said she then ran into her house, grabbed her Ruger LCR from the nightstand, and shot Gumpenberger 5 times in self-defense. She alleged that Gumpenberger ordered her to drive him to the bank to withdraw Russ's money, and claimed that Gumpenberger attacked her in her driveway. Russ was Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. At the crime scene, the police found 9 $100 bills on Betsy's body, along with a handwritten note addressed to her. The note contained chilling instructions for the killer, detailing what they needed to do at Pam's apartment. Firstly, they had to retrieve Russ's money. Then they would take Pam into the house, kill her, and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The murderer wanted Pam's life to end in a specific way. They even specified that the knife should be left sticking out of her neck. They were willing to pay Gumpenberger a hefty sum of $10,000 for completing the task. Pam Hupp was arrested for murder. However, truth behind Gumpenberger's death emerged when Pam voluntarily visited O'Fallon police. During her interview, Pam asked if it'd be recorded, citing her TV appearances with KTVI's Chris Hayes, whom she blamed for attracting criminals. According to the Fallon chief of police and the prosecuting attorney of St. Charles County, Pam had lured Gumpenberger into her home by posing as a television producer named Kathy. She pretended this was for a TV show and tricked him into reenacting a 911 emergency call, providing a perfect cover for the horrific crime she was about to commit. After murdering Gumpenberger, Pam wrote a note that was later found on his body. The police were convinced that Pam was a ruthless killer due to the overwhelming evidence they discovered, including the $100 bills found on the deceased body. It was later revealed that Pam had planted these bills on Gumpenberger's body. Significantly, the 10th $100 bill was found in Pam's dresser, and its serial number was sequential, with 3 of the other $100 bills found on the body. The St. Charles County Police subsequently reopened a complaint filed on August 10, 2016, by Carol Alford, who reported a woman matching Pam's description. This woman had approached Alford, offering to pay her $1,000 to participate in a fake 911 call, and was driving an SUV identical to Pam's. It emerged that Carol Alford was not the only one with a similar complaint. Brent Harleton informed the police that Pam had made him the same offer less than an hour before she shot Gumpenberger. Pam claimed in her interview that she had never met Gumpenberger before, but phone records showed that she had been at his doorstep. Further investigation revealed that Pam owned the knife she claimed Gumpenberger used to attack her, which she had purchased along with other items at a store in O'Fallon. It was also discovered that Pam had a habit of storing her knife between her kitchen counter and stove, similar to how the knife was found in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and central console. During a search of her home, police found a carpet swatch that seemed to be placed to protect her rug from Gumpenberger's blood. The police had doubts about Gumpenberger's ability to commit the crime due to his mental state. It became clear that Pam was guilty when she shot Gumpenberger, apparently trying to protect her rug from blood. On August 23, 2016, Pam Hupp was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she was arrested, she asked to use the restroom and then attempted to take her own life by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she failed. Pam made her first court appearance on January 30, 2017, where St. Charles County Assistant Prosecutor Phil Groenweg argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. Pam Hupp was convicted on all charges by a grand jury in December 2016 and was given a $2 million bail. Her trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to seek the death penalty. They argued that she had made a decision to target Gumpenberger as her victim. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, effectively withdrawing her request for a jury trial and avoiding the death penalty. Following her guilty plea, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. After her sentencing, Pam called her then-husband, Matt Hupp, and admitted to killing Louis Gumpenberger to spare their family the ordeal of a distressing trial. The trial exposed a disturbing aspect of Pam's character, revealing a shocking truth that horrified the police, judges, and the entire nation. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court, leading to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy Faria, born Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria, resided in Troy, Missouri, where she worked alongside Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator. In 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with cancer, and by October 2011, she had discovered that it had spread to her liver, leaving her with only a few months to live. Prior to her death, on December 22, 2011, Betsy altered the sole beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing her husband, Russ Faria, with Pam Hupp, without informing him or their daughters of the change. Pam later claimed that Betsy had instructed her to establish a trust fund for her daughters until they came of age. However, Pam subsequently alleged that Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself, citing a previously undisclosed romantic relationship between the two women before Betsy's death. Betsy's daughters became suspicious and took Pam to court in 2014, but their attempt to retrieve their mother's life insurance fund from Pam and her husband Matt was dismissed by the court. In 2016, Russ took legal action against State Farm. 5 days after Betsy made Pam Hupp the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy on December 22, 2011, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, which left her weakened. Afterwards, she went to her mother's house as planned, where Russ was supposed to pick her up or she would stay overnight. However, Pam Hupp unexpectedly arrived at Betsy's mother's house and offered to drive Betsy home, claiming she dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter later stated that her mother missed her call at approximately 7:21 p.m. By 9:40 p.m., Russ made an emergency call to 911, frantically reporting that his wife Betsy had taken her own life. Russ spent the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterwards, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before heading back home. When Russ called for help, the first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. Upon examining the scene, they immediately ruled out the possibility of suicide. Betsy's body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a wrist cut to the bone. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints near the entrance of the house. The estimated time of Betsy's death was determined to be between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Fingers pointed to Russ Faria as the main suspect after his wife's murder. Authorities believed he had a motive due to being denied $150,000. Russ was arrested a day after the murder and charged with first-degree murder, despite claiming innocence. A pair of blood-stained slippers were found in his closet, and he failed a polygraph test. The police deemed his demeanor suspicious and erratic. Russ's bail was set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay, so he was jailed until his November 18th trial. Pam told police Russ was violent, a heavy drinker, and had threatened Betsy before. With a $150,000 motive, it was easy to suspect him. Russ's trial was an extremely challenging and brutal process. According to his lawyer Joel Schwartz, Russ maintained his innocence, stating that he was with friends on the night in question, and they corroborated his alibi. Furthermore, Russ had purchased food from a store, making it practically impossible for him to have committed the crime in question. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends were in on it, lying about his whereabouts and maybe even helping him. The judge, Christina Menem, refused to let Schwartz present evidence pointing to an alternative suspect, Pam, despite strong evidence of her motive and suspicious behavior. She claimed to have put $100,000 from insurance into a trust fund for her sister's daughters, but later admitted to keeping it for herself. She didn't want others to have it, so she implied she wanted someone else to have it. A detective reported a crime scene camera malfunction, causing key photos to be lost. Despite the odds, Russ was convicted of murder and armed criminal action, sentenced to life plus 30 years. Before Russ's retrial, her lawyer obtained the photos showing no blood trail. He's still trying to find out who sent them to him. Betsy Pam's case took a welcome turn during re-examination. At trial, her sister Camp testified that Russ was devastated when his wife removed him from her insurance policy. Russ had pressed a pillow to Camp's face. Russ's friends were accused of being accessories to murder, but no charges were filed. After 4 years in prison, Russ's attorney appealed the conviction in 2015. However, a judge rejected a review of the case in 2013. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reinvestigated the case, unveiling suspicious facts about Betsy's death and the killer's identity. Pam Hupp's alibi was discredited due to contradictory statements, and it was revealed she lied about not being in the Faria home. The fact that Pam was completely forgotten about in the murder case was not only shocking to Schwartz and Russ, but some members of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department had also been confused as to why Pam was not being investigated as a possible suspect in the case. In an interview, an officer had shared how shocked he was when no one was looking in Pam's direction. Everyone had been fixated on Russ. Media exposed prosecuting attorney ASI's effort to imprison Russ, revealing her relationships with the captain of investigations Mike Lang and a lead investigator prosecuting witness. This led to a retrial in 2015 with a new judge, Christina Menem, initially presiding. After Menem's recusal, Judge Stephen R. granted a new bench trial and released Russ on bond. Schwartz presented evidence against Pam, revealing she told police she saw Russ with another man. CSI agent Amy Buhner believed Russ's blood-stained slippers were planted evidence. Russ was acquitted in 2015 and later sued ASI and deputies for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating their own. Russ was surprised by the speedy exoneration. Russ won a $2 million settlement in 2020. ASI faced a bar complaint from Joel Schwartz, but it was rejected in 2016. In 2017, ASI cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's review of Betsy Faria's case and asked for an independent probe into her conduct, but was cleared of any wrongdoing. Judge Christina Menem was suspended in 2017 for misconduct. She and ASI were later voted out for mishandling the Betsy Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed Mike Wood as the new attorney, who reopened the case, inspired by Russ Ferris's wrong conviction. After Pam Hupp's Alford plea, Wood requested a review by the major case squad. The case also motivated Rick Harold to run for Lincoln County Sheriff in 2020. Pam Hupp was questioned as a suspect in Betsy Faria's murder in July 2021. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The prosecutor sought the death penalty due to the brutal nature of the crime, which included 55 stab wounds and a severely cut wrist. Evidence against Pam included a $150,000 life insurance policy, which she claimed for herself despite promising to put it in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter. Pam Hupp claimed she and Betsy were lovers in 2021 and that Betsy wanted more than friendship. She betrayed Betsy, saying Betsy had a crush on her. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought Pam murdered Betsy, stabbing her 55 times with a kitchen knife while she slept. Pam then used her socks to spread footprints, trying to appear as domestic violence. Pam Hupp's case file linked her to Betsy Faria's murder. Despite claiming to be home by 7:20 p.m., Pam's call records showed she was still at Betsy's. Betsy's body position suggested she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty in 2022, but her trial was delayed due to her attorney's death. It's now set to begin in 2025 and last about a month. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought the case against Pam Hupp was mishandled from the start, with bias against Russ Faria in his second trial. A 2015 destruction order could have erased key evidence, luckily overlooked, ensuring Faria's release. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nathan Pete. Nathan Pete was born on February 12, 1982 in Tamining, Guam. Nathan was not only lucky to be born in a wonderful land, but also grew up in a large and loving family. He has 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, Eric, and a sister, Carmela. All of his siblings are very friendly and always ready to help their parents in everything. Nathan stands out from the others because he never causes trouble. At home, he is a thoughtful son, and at school, he is a diligent student. His outgoing personality helps Nathan make friends easily. He was always the center of attention and his name was often mentioned. Nathan grew up near the ocean and loved swimming since he was a child. Later, he was also passionate about surfing. He often spent all his free time on the beach, enjoying the sunshine and coastal life. While studying at South High School in Santa Rita, Nathan met Michelle, who would later become his wife. He was attracted to her from the first time they met. They began to spend a lot of time together and their feelings grew deeper. They were always together, studying, preparing for schoolwork and helping with housework. Their strong teenage friendship gradually turned into sweet love. When Michelle was 16, her family suffered a great loss when her mother passed away. Michelle spends all her time helping her older sister Melissa, the oldest in the Michelle family, take on the role of mother and manager of the family. Nathan has always supported Michelle and helped take care of the younger siblings. In 2000, after graduating, Nathan proposed to Michelle and she accepted. Because they could not afford a wedding, with the consent of their families, they decided to move in together and start a new life. Nathan found a job as a receptionist at a local hotel. His income was enough to cover his living expenses. However, like many other young people, Nathan and Michelle had their own ambitions. They planned to have their own house and independent life. After getting married, Nathan and Michelle welcomed their first son, Dion. Nathan decided to join the Air Force to improve their family's life because his income was not sufficient. After graduating, Nathan was assigned to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. Although Michelle had to stay home to take care of the children, the family had a stable income. Gradually, their dream became a reality. They built their own house and had a second daughter, Miara. Nathan's success in the military motivated both of them to strive for things they had never achieved before. Finally, after 6 years of being engaged, Michelle and Nathan had a big wedding. Eric shared, "My mother was extremely proud that her youngest son was the first in the family to have a successful career." In 2006, Nathan was transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. There, he was promoted to the position of weapons loader for an A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft in one of the Essex squadrons. He also received additional training in logistics and material management. Nathan was passionate about his work and always tried his best. More importantly, he worked with the spirit of serving his country. One colleague described Nathan as a son of the country. In 2007, Nathan and his family moved to Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada, to take up a new job. There, he was assigned as a junior officer in charge of the supply department, serving the maintenance of fighter aircraft. Along with the development of his career, Nathan's family also grew. Soon after, the Peets welcomed 2 more sons, Drawn and David. Michelle loved life in Las Vegas and considered it an ideal place to live. To please his wife, Nathan decided to find the most suitable house for their large family, a spacious and airy house. The family's dream house was located about 30 to 40 minutes away from the military base. Nathan used his savings to pay for the down payment. Now, the most important thing was to manage the family's income and expenses reasonably. He might need to save more in the future. At least until Pete had a new business opportunity. Initially, Michelle was excited about the unexpected gift from her husband and started planning for their new life. However, over time, the cost of living increased. They spent more than Nathan's income, and the joy of the new house gradually faded. Everyone knows that financial difficulties can destroy the relationships of many couples, and Nathan and Michelle were no exception. Realizing the difficult situation of the family, in mid-2009, Nathan volunteered to join the Army when the United States was at war with Iraq. He was away for 6 months, and during this time, the family's financial situation improved significantly, which pleased Nathan. While Nathan was risking his life on the battlefield, Michelle was worried and scared about having to take care of 4 children alone. She was used to a stable life and could hardly imagine a different one. To dispel her worries, Michelle found a job at a telemarketing company for corporate credit cards. The job brought variety and new relationships to Michelle's life. She wanted financial independence and did not rule out the possibility of opening her own business in the future. Therefore, she actively developed herself by studying at beauty school. When Nathan was at home, everything went on as usual. However, when he was away, Michelle felt lonely. Having children and her husband's long business trips had cooled their relationship. Michelle longed for affection, so she had an affair with Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a handsome colleague. However, Michael was a cunning and dishonest man. He had been imprisoned in 2007 for forgery and attempted theft. Michelle could not resist Michael, whom she jokingly called Sweet Rudy, behind his back. At the end of 2009, Nathan returned home. Although it seemed that the distance and challenges had improved the family relationship, in reality, they had not. Michelle was living a double life. She did not want to lose her husband but was still infatuated with Michael. So she tried to please Nathan in every way. Nathan was fascinated by the changes in Michelle's appearance and personality. During his absence, the children had grown up, and their studies were negatively affected. Therefore, he decided to stay with the family for a long time. Because of his pure and loyal nature, Nathan did not think that Michelle's surprising changes could be related to her infidelity. In Las Vegas, Nathan sought to earn extra income by working the night shift for a higher salary in tutoring baseball to children. However, Michelle could no longer hide her dissatisfaction. As their living conditions deteriorated, her attitude became more negative. Over time, their relationship deteriorated beyond repair. On Thanksgiving 2010, Eric and his wife Veronica visited they. For the first time, Eric noticed a clear tension between Nathan and Michelle. They had changed significantly, and a previous affection seemed to have disappeared. They could not hide their personal and financial difficulties, which were evident in the nearly empty pantry and refrigerator. A week later, on December 1st, 2010, Michelle and Michael exchanged suspicious text messages. At 11:12 p.m., Michael texted Michelle, "Hope you're feeling better. Plans for tomorrow are almost complete." 2 minutes later, he texted again, "If you're not feeling well, let me know. I can give you more time. I appreciate your help." At 11:19 p.m., Michelle replied, "My husband just woke me up. He was getting ready to go out, but I thought he would be late today. I'm sorry this plan has caused you trouble." In the months before the tragedy, Michelle had been conflicted about her relationship with Nathan. She did not want to be with him anymore, but she did not want a divorce because she was worried about the financial and emotional consequences. Michelle thought that Nathan would not support her after the breakup, and that the alimony might not be enough to sustain her. In addition, Michelle knew about Nathan's military insurance. If he died, she would receive about $65,000. These thoughts made Michelle feel guilty and uneasy. One day, she shared these thoughts with Michael and was surprised when he showed interest in the matter. Michelle's initial idea about his ex-lover evolved into a more elaborate plan. Michael realized that the plan was too complicated for him and Michelle to carry out alone, so he recruited his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins. Corey, 33, was a mercenary with a criminal record for theft and fraud. With a criminal nature, he agreed to help but demanded a large reward, estimated at $20,000. After careful consideration, Michelle and Michael agreed to this condition. Later, their group was joined by 3 more people: Jessica Austin, 23, Corey's girlfriend, and her friends, Shannon. Shannon was promised 5% of the commission from Corey and Jessica for helping, and this large sum convinced her to join. The original plan was to shoot Nathan in his Chevrolet Tahoe, then drive the car containing the victim's body to an apartment complex parking lot. Jessica was responsible for purchasing essentials such as men's gloves, car covers, and perfume. Shannon would provide an alibi for Michael by confirming he was with her on the day of the murder, if necessary. On December 1st, 2010, Michelle reported feeling unwell and came home early at 5:30 p.m., a departure from her usual routine due to her beauty school class finishing late. At around 10:40 p.m., Michelle arrived home, just 5 minutes before Nathan was due to leave for his night shift. Michelle found her husband asleep on the sofa. She woke him up and suggested they go upstairs together. He agreed. That was their last night together. Nathan was rushing downstairs because he was late for work. At the same time, Michelle and Michael were exchanging coded messages to avoid detection. Michael and his accomplice were sitting in a black Cadillac SRX, parked in front of the victim's house. They were wearing rubber gloves to avoid leaving any traces. Michael realizes that Nathan's military training could reduce the chances of his plan succeeding. So he decides to attack from behind. Michael pulls out a pistol and shoots Nathan 5 times in the back. Michael quickly drove out of the garage. At the same time, the criminals fled to a prepared location. There, they burned their clothes in the fireplace and destroyed the remaining evidence. Michael and Shannon then went to a hotel to create an alibi for themselves. Meanwhile, Jessica carefully cleaned up the apartment where they were staying. The police and emergency services were on the scene. They were shocked by the incident, as the Peet family's neighborhood was considered one of the safest and most exemplary. Detective Todd Williams began his investigation of the shooting scene by examining the garage. The garage door was unlocked. When he entered, he smelled a strong odor of iron. Blood was everywhere on the walls, in the car, and on the floor. Next to Nathan's uniform, the detective found his keys and wallet. Since the valuables were still intact, he ruled out the possibility of a robbery and murder. After examining the scene, Detective Laurie Anderson decided to interview his wife, Michelle. Michelle recounted the incident and revealed that the family was having financial difficulties. This information suggested several possibilities to the police. Nathan may have been hiding from his wife about his gambling addiction, debt, or infidelity. These theories could explain why Nathan was attacked. However, the available evidence suggested that Nathan may have been deliberately framed. Police checked his cell phone and found only photos of his wife and children, suggesting that Nathan was a good man. The investigation is ongoing. The next step is to investigate the surrounding neighborhood, as there are often witnesses or people who have heard something. As expected, several neighbors reported seeing a car parked near Nathan's house, driven by a man in a brown sweatshirt. The car left shortly after the gunshots were heard. This information gave detectives an important lead to continue their investigation. Nathan's family was shocked and they heard the news. They took the first flight out of Guam and were waiting for details. Nathan's mother, Carmelita Pete, cried the entire trip, unable to accept that her son had died so soon. When the family arrived at his house, Michelle hugged her mother-in-law and fainted. However, Nathan's mother sensed something was off about her daughter-in-law's reaction. She suspected that Michelle's fainting spell might be faked. Investigators decided to interview Michelle again. They asked her about the car that the witnesses had seen. Surprisingly, she revealed that her co-worker Michael Rodriguez also owned a similar car. Michelle's motive for sharing this information was still unclear. However, thanks to her information, the pieces of the case began to fit together. The police then concluded that either Michelle was lying or the perpetrator's plan was flawed. Investigators looked into Michael's background and discovered that he had a criminal record, which made them even more suspicious. When questioned, Michael remained calm and said that on the evening of Nathan's murder, around 9 p.m., he was shopping at the supermarket. There, he met a girl named Shannon. After chatting for a while, they decided to go to the hotel together at around 11 p.m. To verify Michael's story, the police contacted Shannon. She confirmed that the meeting was real. However, the detective felt that something was wrong, so he decided to check the information on Michelle's phone. Experts recovered text messages exchanged between Michelle and Michael over the past year. The content of their conversations was very suspicious. In particular, on the day Nathan was murdered, they discussed a contract with a man named Corey. This conversation seemed more like a form of encryption than a normal business negotiation. This made the detective suspect that this could be how the murder was planned. Investigators were almost certain that both Michelle and Michael were involved in the case, but due to a lack of conclusive evidence, they released Michael while the investigation continued. After examining Michelle's phone, they called her back for further questioning. Michelle appeared restless and seemed to be hiding something. Realizing that the police knew more than she had anticipated, she decided to reveal her affair with Michael. Michelle eventually confessed that a few months before her husband's death, she and Michael had planned to kill Nathan for insurance money. However, she claimed that she later regretted it and abandoned the idea. It appears that she changed her mind during the preparation of the crime. She felt guilty towards her husband and tried to interfere with the plan by turning off his alarm clock. Michelle believed that her accomplice would not wait or miss Nathan, but investigators did not trust her remorse. Her correspondence suggested otherwise. Furthermore, she sent Michael a smiley face emoji shortly after learning of her husband's death. Shannon later went to the police station to confess. She realized her predicament but attempted to downplay her role in the case. She explained that Michael had forced her to provide an alibi. Jessica had asked her for help, mentioning that her friends wanted to teach a big drug dealer a lesson. Shannon's job was to cover up the involvement of one of the attackers. According to her explanation, it was a way to seek justice. She added that Michael had disclosed the whole truth on the night of the attack. Shannon confirmed to the police that as soon as she realized she had been used, she went to report it. She also feared for her life, not knowing what they would do to her. Her testimony was confirmed by the hotel's security cameras. It was clear that Michael and Shannon arrived at the hotel at 11:40 p.m., not 11 p.m. as Michael had previously stated. Shannon's testimony led detectives to Corey and Jessica. But Corey denied any involvement in the crime. To honor the memory of young Sergeant Nathan, his family and friends held a memorial service on December 7, 2010, at the chapel at Nellis Base. Michelle decided not to attend the service, perhaps because she was not in the mood. Many of Nathan's teammates remembered his endurance and tenacity in the military. The squadron commander spoke of Nathan's outstanding achievements for his country and family. Everyone considered him a trusted teammate and noted his humility and dignity. Beside that, in a speech, Eric recalled, "My brother was always an example to the whole family. He loved life and was devoted to his wife and children. Everything Nathan did was for his country, his love, and his friends." On December 9th, Nathan's remains were returned to Guam. On December 15th, a requiem mass was held at St. Francis Church in Temining. Sergeant Nathan's funeral was solemnly conducted at the Pity City Cemetery on Guam. The funeral cortege consisted of 36 motorcycles. At the burial site, 6 officers carried the coffin draped with the American flag. Then, a 21-gun salute rang out. Nathan Pete was sent off as a hero. Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin were arrested without bail on December 8, 2010. Michelle Pete was also arrested the following day. Police were concerned about Michelle's mental state and placed her under surveillance to prevent her from committing suicide. On January 4, 2011, all 4 were arraigned in Clark County District Court. They were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, armed robbery, and murder with a firearm. Michael and Corey were also charged with possession of a firearm. The trial lasted 3 years. Several defendants denied any involvement in the case. With the support of strong legal teams, the defendants made several requests to exclude certain evidence from the case. However, the court denied all of these requests, and they were only able to delay the verdict by repeatedly postponing the trial. On September 21, 2015, the trial for the murder of Nathan Pete began. Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, the first suspect to stand trial, pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. On September 29, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael's appeal was rejected. He showed no emotion upon hearing the verdict and displayed no remorse for his actions. A month later, Michelle Pete appeared in court in Las Vegas. She claimed that she had changed her mind about killing her husband. When allowed to speak, Michelle turned to the victim's parents with tears in her eyes, apologized, and said she loved Nathan and their children. She admitted she was confused and had made a big mistake, then fainted. However, the prosecutor did not believe that Michelle truly wanted to stop the plot to kill her husband. There was substantial evidence that Michelle was more involved in the case than she admitted. It was difficult to understand how a mother of 4 could commit such a heinous crime. The judge sided with the prosecution. Michelle pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm to avoid the death penalty. The victim's family also requested that the death penalty not be imposed. The judge described Michelle's actions as incomprehensible. In October 2015, the third defendant, Corey Alexis Hawkins, also pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison and his application for parole was denied. The judge found Corey had participated in the planning and had been present at the scene of the shooting. Jessica Austin also reached a plea deal with prosecutors and was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, Michelle received her final sentence. She once again cited her emotional instability as the cause of her crime and asked Nathan's family for forgiveness. Carmelita Pete, Nathan's mother, was a very religious person, saw that her ex-daughter-in-law was truly remorseful and sorrowful for her actions. Carmelita believed Michelle needed forgiveness and therefore forgave her in court. She added that the most severe punishment Michelle had to endure was that her children did not want to see her anymore. They were afraid she would harm them like she had harmed their father. Eric Pete told Michelle that their family did not want revenge. It seemed that her mother-in-law's words had impacted her. The family would continue to live without her, and the children would grow up knowing their mother was a murderer. Eric's wife, Veronica, also wanted to speak. She expressed her hatred for Michelle and added that she had disgraced her family by pursuing greed and the love of a stranger. Michelle had destroyed her family. She killed the man she deeply loved, the man with whom she shared her life and built a future. Veronica asked if Michelle realized the consequences of her reckless ambition. It was hard to imagine. Such people always chase happiness without appreciating what they have. Nathan devoted his whole life to giving his all, unlike her. He often lacked sleep and took risks with his health and life. Thanks to that sacrifice, Nathan fulfilled his lover's dreams but never received recognition from her. The Pete children will carry lifelong psychological trauma. They will have difficulty building happy families and integrating into society.